Winter did not arrive gently in the Middle Ages. It crept in quietly, day by day, stealing warmth from the earth and light from the sky, until one morning people realized something had changed. The air no longer forgave mistakes. The cold did not retreat when the sun appeared. It lingered, settled into stone and soil, and stayed. From that moment on, winter was no longer a season. It was an enemy. In medieval life, winter reshaped everything. Time itself felt different. Days grew short and fragile, as if they might break apart before evening came. Darkness pressed in early, swallowing villages whole. The sun, once generous, now seemed distant and weak, barely lifting itself above the horizon before sinking away again. People stopped measuring days by tasks completed and began measuring them by survival. Another morning meant success. Another night endured meant victory. Cold was not just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. It tightened muscles, slowed fingers, stiffened joints, and clouded the mind. Breath left the body in pale clouds, carrying warmth away with every exhale. Skin cracked and bled, toes went numb, fingers lost feeling, and once feeling was gone, so was safety. The cold did not attack loudly. It worked patiently, quietly, waiting for exhaustion, hunger, or sleep to make its move. Homes offered little protection. Most people lived in small, low buildings made of mud, straw, and wood. These walls could block wind, but they could not hold warmth for long. Earth floors drank heat endlessly. Roofs leaked cold downward. Gaps around doors and shutters allowed icy air to slip inside, no matter how carefully they were sealed. Winter always found a way in. Fire became the center of existence. Without it, life ended quickly. Families guarded embers as if they were living things, feeding them slowly, carefully, never wasting a single piece of wood. A fire that went out during the night could mean death before morning. Restarting it with frozen fingers in darkness was one of the most feared tasks of winter life. Flames were warmth, light, and hope all at once. Food changed when winter arrived. Freshness disappeared. Variety vanished. Meals became simple and repetitive, designed not to satisfy but to sustain. Hunger lived quietly in the body, a constant companion. It did not scream, it waited. Each bowl of thin stew or grain porridge was carefully measured, stretched across days that seemed to multiply endlessly. Every bite mattered. Every mistake echoed forward into the weeks ahead. Winter also brought fear that could not be seen. Illness spread more easily when people were weak and crowded together. Coughs lingered, fevers burned longer. Bodies that might have healed in warmer months simply failed. Death often came at night, silently, without struggle. Someone would go to sleep breathing, warm from shared blankets, and not wake again. These losses were mourned, but rarely questioned. Winter claimed lives. That was its nature. Children. And the elderly suffered most. Small bodies could not hold heat well. Old bodies could not generate enough of it. Families did what they could, pressing together, sharing blankets, giving the strongest the task of protecting the weakest. Still, winter decided outcomes without asking permission. Survival was uneven. Loss was common. Outside the home, the world became hostile. Paths disappeared beneath snow and mud. Fields slept under frost. Rivers slowed, froze, or flooded without warning. Travel became dangerous. Isolation grew. Villages turned inward, each household fighting its own quiet battle against the cold. Help was rare. Everyone was struggling. Even sound changed in winter. The world felt muffled, wrapped in snow and heavy air. Footsteps crunched sharply. Wind whispered through bare branches. At night, Silence pressed down until every small sound felt enormous. The crack of settling wood, the cough of a sleeper, the soft shift of bodies seeking warmth. These sounds meant life. Their absence meant fear. Winter demanded constant awareness. People learned to move slowly, to conserve energy, to speak less. Words cost breath, breath cost heat, heat cost life. Everything became a calculation: when to rise, when to feed the fire, when to eat, when to sleep. Every choice carried weight. Yet within this struggle something else existed, a quiet strength, a stubborn refusal to disappear. People adapted. They shared warmth, shared food, shared space. Animals were brought indoors, not as companions, but as sources of heat and survival. Smoke filled rooms, stinging eyes and lungs, but smoke meant fire, and fire meant life. Faith deepened in winter, not always out of comfort, but necessity. Prayer became routine, woven into mornings and nights. People thanked God not for abundance, but for endurance, for breath, for another sunrise. Hope narrowed, focusing on one simple goal: reaching spring. Winter shaped how people understood life itself. There was no illusion of control, no expectation of comfort. Survival was the highest achievement. To wake, to work, to endure cold and hunger and darkness and still continue. This was strength, not loud strength, not heroic strength, quiet, relentless strength. And so winter became more than weather. It became a force that defined existence. It tested bodies and spirits alike. It stripped life down to its most basic needs and asked one question again and again: can you last one more day? For many, the answer was yes. For some, it was no. Winter remembered them all. Warmth was not something people in the Middle Ages expected. It was something they chased, protected, and rationed. To live in a world without warmth meant understanding from a very young age that comfort was temporary and fragile. Heat did not belong to the home. It visited briefly and left without apology. Cold lived everywhere. It clung to stone walls and wooden beams, settled deep into the soil, and lingered long after the sun appeared. Even indoors, the chill never fully released its grip. Rooms held no memory of yesterday's fire. Each morning began as if no warmth had ever existed at all. Buildings were shaped by necessity, not comfort. Homes were small, low, and dark, designed to shelter bodies rather than please them. Thick walls of mud, straw, and wood slowed the wind but could not stop the cold from seeping inward. The earth beneath the floor pulled heat away continuously, absorbing it like water into sand. No matter how close one sat to the fire, the cold always found bare skin. There were no sealed windows. Openings were covered with cloth or thin wooden shutters that rattled when the wind rose. Light entered reluctantly, and warmth barely at all. Draughts crept across the floor, wrapping ankles and calves in invisible fingers. People learned to sit with their feet tucked beneath them, to stand only when necessary, to minimize contact with the frozen ground. Fire was never enough. A single hearth could not heat an entire home. It created a small island of warmth in a sea of cold. Those closest to it felt relief. Those farther away felt only disappointment. Families arranged their lives around this small circle, moving carefully so as not to waste its gift. Children learned early where to sit, how to angle their bodies, how to steal warmth without being noticed. Heat was temporary. Flames rose and fell. Wood burned quickly. Fuel was limited. Fires were allowed to weaken during the night to conserve resources. Easing the cold to reclaim the space while people slept. Waking meant waking into cold, no matter how carefully the embers had been guarded. Clothing offered some defense, but it was heavy, rough and often damp. Wool trapped warmth but scratched skin raw. Linen absorbed moisture and dried slowly in winter air. Garments were layered not for comfort, but for survival. They stiffened with frost, resisted movement, and carried the smell of smoke and sweat that never truly faded. Bathing disappeared entirely. Water was too cold, exposure too dangerous. Cleanliness became secondary to warmth. Bodies carried the evidence of winter on their skin, cracked lips, bleeding knuckles, roughened faces. These marks were not signs of neglect. They were proof of endurance. Even sleep could not guarantee warmth. Beds were thin, made of straw or rushes laid over packed earth. Blankets were precious and few. Families slept together, bodies pressed close, sharing heat as naturally as breath. Privacy vanished in winter, replaced by necessity. Warmth mattered more than dignity. Animals became allies against the cold. Livestock were brought indoors, not out of affection but practicality. Their bodies generated heat. Their presence raised the temperature just enough to matter. The smell was overwhelming at first, then forgotten. Survival adjusted the senses quickly. Breath itself became a reminder of cold. Exhalations fogged the air. Moisture froze in hair and on brows during long nights. Lungs burn. Ed with each inhale. People grew used to pain that modern bodies would resist. The cold taught resilience by force. Warmth, when it came, felt almost unreal. A sudden flare of fire, a moment of sunlight through a narrow opening, the weight of another body pressed close in the dark. These moments were brief, cherished without ceremony. No one assumed they would last. The absence of warmth shaped behavior. Movements slowed. Gestures became economical. Energy was conserved instinctively. People spoke less, rested when possible, and learned to read the subtle signs of danger: numb fingers, stiff limbs, shallow breath. These warnings were never ignored. Children learned quickly. They understood where to sit, when to move, how to curl inward against the cold. Play changed in winter. Laughter softened. Games became quieter, smaller, closer to the fire. Childhood adapted to the temperature. The elderly suffered most. Aging bodies struggled to generate heat. Bones ached constantly. Sleep came lightly. Many did not survive harsh winters, slipping away quietly when the cold became too much. Their deaths were mourned but expected. Warmth had simply run out. Without warmth, time slowed. Days stretched long and heavy. Nights felt endless. The world narrowed to the space near the fire, to the rhythm of tending it, feeding it, protecting it. Life became focused, reduced, essential, and yet people endured. They learned to live within this cold, to function without comfort, to survive without warmth. They accepted the world as it was, not because it was fair, but because it was theirs. Warmth was rare. Survival was everything. Night in the Middle Ages was not measured by hours. There were no clocks ticking softly in the dark, no glowing numbers to mark the passing of time. Night was measured in breath, in the slow rise and fall of chests, in the faint clouds of air leaving the body and vanishing into cold darkness. As long as breath continued, the night had not yet won. Darkness arrived early in winter, thick and complete. It swallowed the landscape, long before people were ready for it. Villages vanished into blackness, their shapes erased, as if they had never existed at all. Inside the home, darkness pressed close, not softened by streetlights or distant glow, but absolute and heavy. Once the fire dimmed, the world narrowed to what could be felt rather than seen. breathing changed when night settled in. Each inhale burned slightly, the cold scraping the back of the throat. Each exhale carried warmth away, stolen instantly by the air. People learned to breathe slowly, carefully, as if rushing breath might waste precious heat. Shallow breaths conserved warmth. Deep breaths invited pain. Sleep came reluctantly. Bodies resisted surrendering consciousness when the cold was strongest. Muscles stayed tense. Minds hovered between rest and alertness. Even while sleeping, people listened. A crackle from the fire, a shift beside them, a cough in the darkness. These sounds Ain't life continued. Silence meant fear. Families slept together, packed tightly like animals seeking shelter. Children were tucked between adults. The weakest were protected by the strongest. Arms draped over shoulders, legs intertwined, blankets pulled up carefully, sealed against drafts as best they could be. Every body added warmth to the shared space. Alone, no one survived winter nights easily. The fire was allowed to fade but never die. Embers glowed faintly, casting almost no light, offering just enough warmth to keep the air from turning deadly. Someone always listened for its sound, even while half asleep. The quiet crackle was reassurance. Its absence brought dread. Breath became visible in the cold darkness. Moisture collected in hair, froze along brows and lashes. Lips dried and split. Noses burned with every inhale. Sleep did not erase discomfort, it only dulled it. Dreams came and went, often shallow, easily broken by the cold pressing through blankets. Night stretched endlessly. Without light, time dissolved. People drifted in and out of sleep, unsure how long they had rested or how much longer remained before morning. The body learned its own rhythms, waking naturally in the deepest part of the night, when cold was strongest and the fire weakest. This waking hour was familiar. People sat quietly by the embers, feeding the fire just enough to survive until dawn. They moved slowly, conserving energy, careful not to wake others unless necessary. Breath fogged in. The dim glow as flames responded weakly, then slowly grew. Outside, the world was silent but not empty. Wind whispered through bare branches. Snow creaked under its own weight. Animals moved cautiously in the dark, driven by hunger. Wolves came closer to human dwellings in winter, drawn by the promise of warmth and life. Their howls, when heard, carried deep into the night and settled into the bones. Inside, breath remained the measure. Parents listened to children sleeping. A steady rhythm meant safety. A pause too long sent fear racing through tired minds. The night claimed lives quietly, often without struggle. A child too cold, an old body too weak. Morning revealed what darkness had taken. Fear lived softly in winter nights. It did not shout. It waited. People did not speak of it openly, but everyone felt it. The understanding that sleep itself carried risk, that closing one's eyes meant trusting the body to keep breathing despite cold and hunger. And yet, exhaustion always won eventually. Bodies needed rest to survive. Muscles slackened, breathing slowed, warmth pooled where bodies touched. The cold retreated slightly, held at bay by shared heat and stubborn life. Breath deepened in second sleep. This rest was heavier, more complete. Dreams softened, the body released tension little by little. The fire, now steadier, pulsed gently. Embers glowed with stored heat, no longer demanding attention. In these hours, time became meaningless. Night could last forever or end in a heartbeat. Breath continued. That was enough. Survival did not require certainty. It required continuation. Somewhere in the darkness, someone stirred. A cough broke the silence, wet and worrying, breath caught, then resumed. Another reminder that winter tested everyone, one inhale at a time. As the night wore on, the cold remained, patient and unyielding. It pressed against walls, seeped through cracks, waited for weakness. But as long as breath moved in and out of sleeping bodies, the cold had not yet won. Night was endured, not conquered. Each breath was a small act of resistance. Each sleeping body still warm was proof that life held on. And so winter nights passed the only way they could be measured, not in hours, not in darkness, but in breath. Sleep in the Middle Ages rested on straw. Not soft mattresses or layered blankets, but dried stalks gathered from fields long after harvest had passed. Straw was cheap, available, and endlessly reused. It crackled softly under weight, shifting through the night as bodies turned and settled. It smelled of earth, dust, and the last warmth of summer, now pressed into service against winter. Straw beds were built low, close to the ground where cold gathered most fiercely. A wooden frame, sometimes nothing more than planks or a shallow box, held the straw in place. Over time, the straw flattened, broke, and turned brittle. Sharp ends poked through thin cloth coverings, pressing into skin. Comfort was not expected. Survival was these. Beds served more than one purpose. Straw trapped small pockets of air, and air held warmth. It created a thin barrier between the body and the frozen earth beneath. Without it, the cold climbed quickly into bones. With it, there was at least a pause, a brief resistance before chill took hold. People learned to arrange straw carefully. Fresh layers were added when possible, older ones pushed aside. Damp straw was dangerous, holding cold and inviting sickness. Dryness mattered as much as thickness. In winter, keeping bedding dry was an unending challenge. Snow melted on boots, breath condensed indoors, roofs leaked. Straw absorbed everything. Over time, straw beds became ecosystems of their own. Fleas and lice thrived in the warmth of bodies and bedding. They bit constantly, especially at night, when movement slowed and skin was exposed. Scratching became part of sleep, an unconscious response that continued even in dreams. People accepted it. There were no alternatives. Blankets were rare and precious. Most were made of wool, heavy and coarse. Some were patched repeatedly, holding together through careful repair. Others were little more than woven cloth, thin and stiff with age. Blankets did not fully block the cold. They slowed it. That was enough to matter. Above the straw and beneath the blankets, layers of clothing added another defense. People slept dressed, often in the same garments worn during the day. Linen shirts, woolen tunics, stockings pulled high. Removing clothing NG meant losing warmth. Cleanliness was sacrificed for heat. Barriers formed naturally. Straw below, bodies in the middle, cloth above. Each layer played a role in keeping cold at bay. Families stacked these barriers together, sharing space and heat. Children slept closest to adults. Elders were placed where warmth was strongest. Every sleeping arrangement was deliberate. Walls offered little protection. Stone held cold like memory. Wood shrank in winter, opening cracks that let wind creep inside. Straw was sometimes packed into gaps along walls or stuffed into shutters. It rustled when the wind pushed against it, a quiet reminder of the cold waiting outside. At night, breath dampened the bedding. Moisture settled into straw and cloth. By morning, frost sometimes formed along edges of blankets or near walls. People shook out straw beds when possible. lifting layers to dry them near the fire. When drying was impossible, beds remained damp, cold clinging stubbornly to every fibre. Straw was replaced only when it became unbearable. Fresh straw was stiff and sharp, but it smelled cleaner, held air better, and resisted moisture longer. The act of changing bedding was labour-intensive, especially in winter when movement itself drained energy. Many waited too long. Despite discomfort, straw beds offered familiarity. They marked the boundary between waking struggle and fragile rest. Lying down meant entering a small protected space, however imperfect. It meant withdrawing from the cold world into something smaller and more manageable. Sleep settled slowly. The body adjusted to pressure points, straw shifting beneath weight. Sharp edges softened over time. The mind accepted the environment as it was. Complaints faded into tired silence. During the night, straw made quiet sounds, a soft crunch when someone turned, a faint rustle when a blanket was pulled tighter. These sounds were reassuring. They meant life moved. Stillness was more frightening than noise. Children often burrowed deeper into straw beds, curling instinctively to preserve warmth. Adults remained half alert even while resting, ready to adjust coverings or pull someone closer if shivering became too violent. Care did not stop with sleep. It simply changed form. In the deepest part of winter, straw became a final line of defense. When fires failed or fuel ran out, bedding mattered more than anything else. People piled additional straw onto beds, floors, even walls. The house itself became a nest, layered and reinforced. Morning revealed the toll. Bodies stiff with cold, limbs slow to move, faces marked by red, cracked skin. Straw clung to clothing and hair, yet waking meant survival. The bed had done its job, imperfect but sufficient. Straw beds were never meant to last forever. They were temporary solutions in a season that tested endurance. But night after night, they carried people through the cold hours, holding warmth just long enough. They were not comfortable. They were not clean. They were not safe from pests or sickness. But they formed a barrier, thin and fragile, between human life and winter's quiet hunger. And in a world where warmth was scarce and the cold was patient, that barrier mattered more than comfort ever could. Animals were not separate from winter survival. They were its living centre. Their bodies breathed warmth into cold spaces, their presence steady and familiar. In the Middle Ages, animals were not kept at a distance. They lived close, often closer than comfort allowed, because comfort mattered less than heat. The warmth of animals was trusted. It was reliable in ways fire sometimes was not. Fires died, wood ran out, wind slipped through walls, but animals generated heat as long as they lived and breathed. That warmth was slow, deep, and constant. Homes were built with this in mind. In many places, animals slept under the same roof as people, sometimes separated only by a low wall, sometimes not separated at all. Cows, goats, sheep, and pigs filled the air with breath and movement. Their bodies warmed the ground. Their presence softened the cold that crept upward through floors. The smell was strong and impossible to ignore. Straw, manure, damp fur, and warm breath mixed into a heavy, earthy scent. It clung to walls and clothing. People noticed it, but they did not resist it. Smell was a small price to pay for survival. At night, animals shifted and sighed. Hooves scraped gently. A cow exhaled slowly, her breath visible in faint sea. louds. These sounds blended with human breathing, creating a shared rhythm. Life clustered together, holding the cold outside as best it could. Animals were living heat sources, but they were also fragile. Winter tested them as harshly as it tested people. Thin animals weakened quickly. Milk slowed. Wool lost its fullness. Farmers watched closely, knowing that an animal lost to winter meant hunger later on. Great care was taken to keep animals alive. Extra straw was laid beneath them. Roofs were checked for leaks. Wind-blocking barriers were built from whatever materials were available. Animals were fed before people if necessary, because their survival supported human survival. Children often slept closest to animals. The warmth rising from a cow's body or a cluster of sheep was stronger near the ground. Children curled near low walls, drawing heat into their small frames. Animals accepted this closeness without resistance. In winter, even beasts understood necessity. Animals breathed steadily through the night. Their breath was slow and deep, unhurried. That rhythm calmed human minds. As long as animals breathed, the space remained alive. Silence was more frightening than noise. Movement meant warmth still flowed. In the deepest cold, people leaned against animals deliberately, pressing hands against warm flanks to restore feeling. Fingers numb from work found relief in thick fur. Cold toes were tucked closer to shared heat. Animals shifted but did not pull away. Their pati ents was part of the bond. The heartbeats of animals were felt as much as heard, a steady thrum beneath hide and wool, proof that warmth was being created from within. Fire consumed fuel. Animals created heat simply by existing. That made them precious beyond measure. During storms, animals grew restless. Wind frightened them. Snow piled against doors and walls. People soothed them with quiet voices, slow movements. Panic wasted energy. Calm preserved it. The winter demanded stillness whenever possible. Animals also carried memory. Their cycles marked time when days blurred together. Feeding times, milking hours, the steady work of care continued even in darkness and cold. These routines anchored people when winter threatened to dissolve all structure. When an animal fell ill, fear spread quickly. A sick cow or dying sheep meant more than loss of food. It meant loss of warmth. People watched signs carefully, slowed movement, labored breathing, refusal to eat. Remedies were limited, often ineffective. Many nights were spent listening anxiously for familiar sounds. Death, when it came, was quiet and heavy. An animal lost in winter left a space that felt colder immediately. Its absence was physical. The air changed. People moved closer together to compensate, but something irreplaceable was gone. Still, animals endured. Thick hides insulated them. Fat stores carried them through scarcity. Their bodies were designed for cold in ways human bodies were not. People learned from them, observing how they conserved energy, how they huddled, how they endured stillness. In return, people offered protection, not out of sentiment but understanding. Survival was shared. Humans and animals depended on each other completely during winter's grip. Morning light revealed the truth of the night. Steam rose from animal bodies as doors opened. Frost melted slightly near warm flanks. The space felt alive again. People moved stiffly, but they moved. Animals rose slowly, shaking straw from their coats. The day would bring work, cold, and hunger again. But the night had been endured, warmth had been shared, breath had continued. Animals were not just resources, They were the living heart that kept winter from winning entirely. Their warmth-filled spaces fire could not reach. Their presence softened fear. Their steady breathing carried people through the darkest hours. In a world without modern warmth, animals were not outside life. They were inside it, close enough to feel, close enough to save lives. And through long winter nights, as snow pressed against walls and wind searched for weakness, that shared warmth remained. Quiet, living, and essential. The cottage was small, almost impossibly so, and every corner was filled with the weight of life and survival. At its centre, a fire smouldered in the pit, the fragile heart of warmth for the entire household. Smoke curled from the fire, filling the room with a steady haze, curling around wooden beams and weaving through every G.A.P. in the walls. It was never clean, never fragrant. It carried the scent of burned wood, mingled with the tang of sweat, the earthy odour of straw, and the lingering presence of animals. But it was life. Without that smoke-filled fire, the cold would have no barriers to stop it. Smoke became a constant companion in winter, unavoidable yet essential. It rose in ribbons that seemed almost alive, wrapping around people and animals alike, clinging to hair, clothing, and skin. Inhaling it was painful at first. The eyes watered, throats burned, and coughing followed, but eventually the body adapted. Humans were resilient, and survival demanded it. The smoke was the price of warmth, the invisible shield against frost that crept through every floorboard and wall. Even as it stung and clung, smoke carried signals of life. The way it lifted and danced showed which logs burned best, which parts of the fire needed tending. A crackle followed a burst of flame, a plume of smoke rose, and the household adjusted. Every movement around the fire was intentional, adding a stick, blowing gently on embers, stirring ash. All were part of a careful dance, practiced countless times. In the winter of 1347, each motion mattered. Fire was fragile. Heat could vanish in a moment, replaced instantly by the sharp bite of the cold. Children learned early to move around smoke without complaint. Their eyes adjusted more quickly than adults. Their bodies tolerated the stinging air with astonishing ease. Still, even they could feel the weight of it pressing on the lungs, a tangible reminder that survival was never without sacrifice. The smoke blurred the line between safety and danger, warmth and suffocation, but living within that blur was a lesson passed down through generations. Smoke also carried memory. It was the same scent that their ancestors had breathed, the same haze that had clung to mothers and fathers and grandmothers during long frozen nights. It wrapped around the edges of life like a thick, invisible blanket, connecting past to present. Every inhalation was a reminder that life persisted, that others had endured worse and yet survived. In some strange way, the smoke felt protective, a companion that both chafed and comforted, always marking the presence of fire and warmth. Its presence was a guide through the dark. In the thick of night, when the cottages were silent and snow muffled all other sound, the tendrils of smoke illuminated movement. Parents could check on children without waking them, following the twisting haze as it traced their careful steps. The animal's warmth rose through it, mingling with the smoke to create a tapestry of life, a living map of survival within the confined space. The fire demanded attention. Smoke signaled when logs were failing, when the embers needed coaxing back to life. Every household member understood this unspoken language. Silence carried meaning, and even in the heavy haze people could sense the subtle differences in air. A curl of smoke too high or too low, A sudden change in its color indicated shifts in heat and safety. In winter, reading smoke was as essential as reading the weather outside. Smoke also carried warning. Thick black plumes indicated danger, wet wood, poor ventilation, or a fire teetering on extinction. Everyone responded instinctively. Hands worked efficiently to adjust logs, shift straw, or move vessels of water to dampen or ignite as needed. A moment of hesitation could cost warmth, and warmth was survival. In the smoky room, people moved in quiet cooperation, an unspoken choreography learned through years of winter endurance. Even in the haze, beauty existed. Sunlight barely filtered through the oiled linen window, yet when it caught the smoke at the right angle, golden strands appeared to float in the room. It was fleeting, and few had time to pause and notice, but those who did could feel a strange comfort in it. Smoke, dangerous and suffocating, also carried fleeting glimpses of magic. Light, warmth, life, an interwoven display of existence in the coldest season. Animals contributed to the smoky environment. Their breaths and movements stirred the haze, blending it with their own scent and warmth. Pigs snorted, sheep shifted, and chickens flapped quietly. The smoke never settled completely. It was alive, mingling with movement and life. People adapted, learning which parts of the room to avoid when air thickened, where warmth was strongest, and where safety rest. The smoke became part of the rhythm of winter, part of the household itself. Smoke also affected sleep. It curled over mattresses, pressing slightly on the skin, creating an invisible cocoon around each sleeper. Breath fogged in the air, mingling with smoke in pale clouds. It reminded people of both comfort and danger, but also coaxed rest. The fire's warmth rose with the smoke, and even the coldest fingers and toes slowly regained feeling under layered blankets. Life persisted within the haze, proof of endurance in the simplest forms. Outside, the wind roared and snow pressed against fragile walls. Inside, smoke marked the boundaries of human persistence. Its presence reminded all who breathed it that survival was a constant negotiation between danger and warmth, fire, smoke, and human ingenuity intertwined, creating a fragile but steady barrier against winter's cruelty. Even when coughing shook the chest and stung the eyes, no one dared complain. Each inhalation was a small victory. Smoke signaled life, persistence, and the unyielding effort to hold winter at bay. Mothers stirred pottage on the fire, children slept close to animals, and fathers monitored embers, all orchestrated beneath the curling haze. Smoke was part of survival. It was part of life itself. Smoke-filled rooms created intimacy. People leaned close to share warmth, whispered quietly so breath mixed with haze, and performed small gestures of care. Every action was magnified by necessity. Meals prepared low, GS adjusted, blankets arranged. Each carried meaning. Smoke made people aware of presence, of touch, of the fragile heartbeat of the household. In this environment, the line between discomfort and safety was blurred. Smoke burned eyes, yet it warmed the air. It coated walls and floors, yet it carried life. People learned patience and attentiveness, sensing the smallest signals within its thickness. It demanded respect and awareness, but it also offered protection. Through long nights, smoke and embers wove the household together. It was the invisible guardian against the cold, a companion in stillness and movement. Children grew used to it. Animals breathed within it. Families relied upon it. Every curling wisp was a reminder of warmth, vigilance, and the fragile persistence of life. And when dawn finally approached, grey and hesitant through the oiled linen, smoke still lingered, carrying the memory of night and the promise of continued survival. It had witnessed another dark stretch, another night of careful balance, another household breathing together against winter's relentless grip. The snow lay thick and unbroken across the fields, a silent white blanket that hid both beauty and threat. Beneath its smooth surface, the earth was hard and unyielding, frozen solid from weeks of relentless cold. For those living in medieval England, this winter world was not just cold. It was a cage, pressing in on every part of life. Hunger waited patiently beneath the snow, hidden from but never absent from thought. Each day, as the first pale light filtered through the oiled linen window, it reminded the household that survival was never guaranteed. Inside the small cottage, the family moved carefully, mindful of every ounce of warmth and every morsel of food. The fire crackled softly, the smoke curling upward, mingling with the cold air that slipped through gaps in the walls. Pottage simmered in the iron pot, but portions were small, stretched carefully to feed the children, the husband, the parents, and the woman herself. Each mouthful was measured, each bite a reminder of what was at stake. In winter, food was more than nourishment, it was a lifeline. Without it, the body's defences faltered against the cold, the disease, and the fatigue that crept through every household. During these harsh months, the children moved quietly around the cottage, their small bodies conserving heat, eyes bright, but subdued with the weight of the season. They were learning lessons older than anyone could remember, lessons of patience, endurance, and careful calculation. Every scrap of food counted. A dried pea, a shriveled turnip, a spoonful of barley pottage. These became treasures in a world where the ground outside offered nothing and the stores of autumn dwindled day by day. The adults taught restraint, often taking less themselves to ensure the children received enough. Hunger was shared, but it was never ignored. Outside, the snow muffled the village. The forest loom, dark and silent, its trees heavy with frost. Wolves and other predators moved closer to the edges of human settlements, drawn by the scent of warmth and food, while deer and rabbits hunkered deeper into their hidden burrows, as much a part of the struggle as the people themselves. Every venture outside the cottage was fraught with risk. Each trip to the well, each task in the fields or forest, required careful planning. Hunger was a motivator, but it also demanded caution. Even the bravest could fall victim to frostbite, icy rivers, or sudden blizzards. The family's animals were as much a source of sustenance as they were warmth and company. The pig, the sheep, and the chickens were carefully fed and tended. Each animal represented security against the endless cold and hunger. Losing one could mean a week of additional struggle, an unplanned risk of starvation, or even death. Feeding them required energy, and energy required food. The cycle was unending. Every day was a delicate balance of giving and taking, conserving and consuming. Hunger manifested in more subtle ways as well. The body's responses were constant companions: stomach pangs, the shiver of weak muscles, the dull ache of fatigue pressing into bones. People became keenly aware of how little their bodies could endure, noting the difference between just enough and too little. The mind, too, adapted. Every decision was measured against potential scarcity. How to use the last scraps of meat, which logs to burn for. Warmth, which tasks could be delayed. Even the act of sleeping became strategic, conserving calories while huddling for warmth. Inside the smoky warmth of the cottage, survival was orchestrated through rhythm and routine. The woman, Agnes as she was known, moved with practiced efficiency, stirring the pottage, monitoring the fire, and tending to the children. Each motion was deliberate, minimizing wasted energy. Her husband, weakened by a lingering cough, contributed where he could, keeping vigil over the embers and attending to the animals. Their parents, seasoned by years of winters like this, performed tasks with a quiet dignity, guiding the younger generation through the necessary rituals of endurance. Hunger shaped everything, movement, speech, and the very structure of the day. Despite the weight of deprivation, there were small comforts. The smell of cooking pottage, the warmth radiating from the fire, and the gentle touch of a child's hand brought fleeting reprieve. Even the simple act of breathing in the smoky warmth became a moment of relief. Hunger was constant, but these small moments reminded the family that life persisted, that another day could be met with patience and strategy. The snow outside remained merciless, yet inside, life continued quietly, resiliently. Hunger beneath the snow extended beyond the household. In neighbouring cottages, families struggled similarly. Villagers moved cautiously through the frost-bitten streets, trading what little they had, sharing resources sparingly. The network of survival was communal, though always under strain. Anyone failing to manage rations faced real danger. Winter was democratic in its cruelty, it claimed without bias, leaving no corner untouched. Children learned early that life required observation. They noticed the slight bowing of the trees under the weight of snow, the subtle patterns in footprints, the way frost gathered differently on various surfaces. These observations mattered, teaching them when it was safe to venture out, where animals might be found, and how much food could be gathered. Hunger was a teacher as well as a threat, shaping the senses and sharpening awareness. The act of sharing food became ritualized. Meals were prepared slowly, portions divided carefully. Everyone waited for the youngest to be fed first, then the adults took what remained. These small practices reinforced bonds of care and mutual survival. Hunger was tempered by these rituals, acknowledging scarcity while honoring family and life. Even in the presence of deprivation, there were moments of beauty and wonder. The snow, pure and undisturbed, reflected moonlight at night, casting a soft glow into the oiled linen window. The patterns it formed on rooftops and fences inspired quiet reflection, a reminder that even in hardship, the world could still offer glimpses of grace. Observing such fleeting beauty was a privilege, often only possible when the household paused briefly between chores and service. Tasks. Inside, the warmth from the fire and animals created a small oasis against the frozen world. Breath mingled with smoke, mingled with the subtle sounds of life, a chicken stirring, a pig snuffling, the quiet rhythm of a child breathing in sleep. This living tapestry of sound and scent became a bulwark against the emptiness beyond the walls. Hunger remained, but within this microcosm of care and life, it could be managed, confronted, and endured. As the day progressed, Rationing became a delicate performance. Agnes measured pottage carefully, ensuring each bowl sustained but did not deplete. Decisions were made with quiet seriousness: how much wood to burn, how much water to fetch, and which chores required immediate attention. Each small act had consequence, every choice balanced against the invisible threat of hunger and the cold that pressed through the walls. Hunger beneath the snow was relentless but not absolute. It demanded ingenuity, persistence, and attention to minute details. The family learned to interpret the signals of scarcity, adjusting meals, tending fires, and protecting the animals. Every choice was a thread in the fabric of survival, each movement weaving a story of resilience against a silent and merciless winter, even as night approached again, bringing longer shadows and biting frost. Life within the cottage remained resilient. The fire continued to smoulder, the smoke curling upward, and the family worked in unison to ensure warmth and nourishment. Tea hunger was present, insistent, but it was met with careful strategy and unwavering care. Life endured beneath the snow, quiet but determined, holding fast until the promise of spring, distant though it may be, arrived once more. The morning sun struggled to pierce the dense grey sky, casting only a dim, diffused light across the village. Each breath outside felt like inhaling shards of ice, the cold pressing into lungs and settling deep into the chest. In winter, the cold was not just an external force, it weighed on the body, infiltrating every movement, every thought, every moment. For medieval villagers, it was constant, relentless, a silent opponent that claimed strength and patience in equal measure. Every task began with an awareness of the chill, every step measured against its capacity to sap energy and will. Inside the small cottage, warmth was a scarce treasure, carefully guarded. The fire glowed faintly, its embers coaxed to life with practiced care, sending out a muted heat that only partially pushed back the pervasive cold. The floor, hard-packed earth, radiated chill, seeping through thin straw mats and worn woolen garments. Even huddled together, the family could feel the cold pressing in, curling around their bones like a persistent fog. Movement was slow and deliberate. Quick motions only drew attention to the body's vulnerability. Each action required energy, and energy was precious, carefully rationed like the food in the iron pot. The cold carried with eye a silence heavier than any sound. Outside, the snow muted footsteps, muffled the wind's whistle, and softened the distant calls of villagers. Inside, the stillness was punctuated only by the quiet breathing of the sleeping children, the soft snorts of the pig, and the occasional crackle of the embers. In this quiet, the cold felt even more tangible, pressing against the walls, seeping into every crevice, reminding the inhabitants that life depended on constant vigilance. The very air seemed to resist warmth, carrying frost into every corner of the small home. For those rising at dawn, the first moments were the hardest. Skin tingled, toes and fingers numb with exposure, and each step toward the fire was an act of courage. Clothing, worn in layers, offered some protection, but each layer was stiff and coarse, rubbing against chilled skin and demanding attention. Even the simple act of dressing became a battle against the cold. Garments had to be layered in a precise order, linen closest to the skin to absorb moisture, wool for insulation, and additional wraps to preserve precious body heat. Missteps could lead to frostbite, illness, or an exhaustion that the body could not recover from easily. Outside, the weight of the cold was evident in the landscape. Snow hung heavy on tree branches, bending them to the ground, while frozen rivers and ponds reflected a lifeless silver. Paths that had been worn smooth in warmer months were now obscured, treacherous with hidden ice and powed, eerie drifts. The animals of the forest huddled together, their movements slow and deliberate, conserving energy in a world where food and warmth were both scarce. Villagers, aware of these threats, moved cautiously, mindful of every step, every breath, every decision. The cold dictated their pace and their choices. The family's morning routine unfolded like a delicate dance, choreographed by experience and necessity. Agnes stirred the embers, coaxing warmth back into the iron pot while her husband tended to the animals. Their children remained close, small bodies curled into protective postures, conserving heat as they waited for the day's first meal. Even the animals contributed, their warmth radiating across the small room, a living barrier against the cold. Each movement, each breath, was synchronized to preserve energy and maximize warmth. In winter, cooperation was survival, and the weight of the cold made solitude almost unbearable. Hunger and cold were intertwined adversaries. The lack of food made the body more vulnerable to frost, while the cold sapped the strength needed to prepare meals or gather supplies. Each day, the family balanced the need for sustenance with the imperative to maintain warmth. Firewood was scarce and had to be used wisely. Water often froze before it could be drawn, necessitating extra effort to break through the icy crust and bring it inside. Every resource, every action, became a negotiation with the cold, a reminder that comfort was fleeting, and survival demanded constant attention. Even small tasks became monumental under winter's weight. Carrying a bucket of water from the well required careful footing as ice made the path treacherous. Chopping wood demanded energy and coordination, the body resisting each swing as cold muscles tightened against the effort. Feeding the animals meant lingering outside, exposed to the wind that cut across the village with merciless persistence. In every movement the cold imposed its presence, shaping the rhythm of life and teaching patience, endurance, and a deep awareness of one's surroundings. Within the cottage, the fire offered moments of relief, but the warmth was localized and only for as long as the flames were maintained. The embers had to be tended constantly, coaxed back to life when they waned, lest the cold infiltrate once more. Each family member contributed, understanding that the success of survival was collective. The pig and sheep, nestled in their corner, were more than livestock. They were allies in the fight against the cold, their bodies radiating warmth that could be shared if everyone huddled together. The cold also shaped thought and imagination. Nights spent in its weight brought clarity to priorities. Stripping life down to essentials, superfluous concerns faded, leaving only what mattered: warmth, food, and the safety of loved ones. Children, though small, learned quickly to appreciate the simplest comforts: the gentle glow of firelight, the warmth of another body pressed close, the taste of hot pottage. These small joys became profound in contrast to the harshness of the frozen world outside. Winter imposed rhythm, but also reflection. The weight of the cold encouraged quiet moments of introspection where individuals could consider the fragility of life and the strength required to endure. Even simple observations, the frost patterns on the window, the way smoke curled from the chimney, or the faint sounds of other villagers moving about, offered perspective and a sense of connection. Though survival was constant, there were these fleeting spaces for awareness, contemplation, and acceptance of life's challenges. Health was a constant concern. Exposure to cold weakened resistance, made coughs more dangerous, and turned minor ailments into serious threats. Parents watched children closely, noting the first signs of discomfort or illness, ready to intervene with blankets, food, or a dose of herbal remedy. The weight of responsibility was tangible, pressing against the shoulders like the winter wind itself. Each decision had consequences, and in a season as harsh as this, mistakes could be fatal. The cold infiltrated even the mind. Decisions had to be made slowly, carefully, weighing effort against risk. Every venture outdoors required preparation, layered clothing, warm footwear, a plan to move efficiently while conserving energy. The body's natural desire to retreat from exposure had to be managed with reason and patience. SKs were planned with attention to detail, and even the smallest errors were magnified by the relentless presence of frost and ice. Despite its harshness, the cold brought moments of quiet beauty. Frosted windows glimmered in the weak sunlight. Snow muffled sound in ways that made the world feel almost suspended, and the occasional glimpse of wildlife moving cautiously across the fields inspired awe and humility. These glimpses reminded villagers that even in suffering, life persisted, and that the world held wonders beyond immediate survival. As the day wore on, the family maintained their routine, each action measured, each step deliberate. The fire continued to burn, smoke curling upward into the thatched roof, carrying warmth and scent throughout the room. The animals contributed their heat, the children remained close, and the adults orchestrated every moment with precision. In this way, the cold was acknowledged and met, not defeated, but managed, kept at bay through care, vigilance, and endurance. Even as night fell again, the weight of the cold pressed against every wall, every corner, every body within the cottage. Yet, life persisted. The family huddled, shared warmth, and nurtured hope. Hunger and frost demanded attention, but they also brought awareness, resilience, and a profound appreciation for small comforts. Each ember maintained, each breath drawn, and each moment of togetherness became a victory, a measured triumph against the unrelenting winter. The chill of winter seemed to seep not only into the bones but into every breath, every sigh, every heartbeat of the cottage. It carried with it more than cold. It carried the ever-present shadow of sickness, the invisible threat that lingered quietly in the corners and cracks of the small home. Even before sunrise, Agnes could feel it in the air, in the faint, uneven coughs that escaped her husband's chest, in the way her mother shifted uneasily in her straw mattress, and in the subtle pallor of her children's cheeks. Illness in winter was no fleeting visitor. It was a persistent, unwelcome companion, and it was patient. It did not hurry. It waited, quietly observing the body's defenses, testing every weak point, choosing its moment to strike. In the early hours before the fire had been coaxed to full life, Agnes moved softly, careful not to stir her family more than necessary. Her husband coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that drew her attention like a bell tolling in a fog. She placed a hand on his back, feeling the rapid tremor of his breathing, the uneven rise and fall of his chest. The cough was familiar, yet it never lost its power to worry her. Years of experience had taught her that a minor cough in winter could become something far more dangerous before morning light touched the frost-covered village. She breathed slowly herself, letting the warmth of her body mingle with his, hoping to lend a fraction of resistance through simple presence. Her eyes wandered to her children, curled in their straw beds, tiny bodies pressing together for warmth. Even in sleep, illness was a threat, A child's small body could succumb quickly if the cold outmatched their strength, if the harsh winter stole the energy needed to resist a fever. Agnes remembered the winters of her own childhood, of friends and cousins who had vanished quietly into the long nights of mothers mourning children in small, hushed graves. Winter had taught her the subtle language of survival, observation, attention, preparation. Every shiver, every slight pallor, every fleeting look of discomfort mattered. Each sign was a whisper, a warning, a chance to intervene before the cold or illness prevailed. The fire was coaxed into life, amber flames licking the edges of the iron pot that would soon hold pottage. Smoke curled upward into the thatched roof, filling the small room with its familiar scent, and Agnes inhaled deeply. The warmth did more than protect from cold. It offered some defense against sickness, the simple relief of temperature-preserving energy, keeping the body from surrendering to winter's cruel demands. She added a handful of sticks to the fire, listening to the small pops and hisses as moisture evaporated from the wood. Even such a simple task became crucial in a season where every exertion could tip the balance between resilience and vulnerability. She turned to her husband, lifting the clay bottle with her mother's careful guidance, measuring the small doses of herbal remedy that might ease his fevered chest. The potion was bitter and strong, designed to open the lungs, calm the fever, and give his body the strength to fight. He swallowed without waking fully, an automatic response, and settled back into the warmth of the blankets. Agnes sat beside him for a moment longer, her hand on his arm, feeling the faint heat of life beneath the tremor of illness. She whispered a soft blessing into the quiet room, not loud enough to disturb the children, but enough for the spirits of protection that she believed lingered, enough for the fragile hope that they would make it through the day. Outside, the snow pressed against the walls in a silent, frozen weight. The wind rose occasionally, rattling the thin windows covered in oiled linen, but the cold within the walls was now tempered by the collective warmth of bodies and fire. Still, the threat of illness was never far. Winter carried with it viruses and fevers that spread through the village silently, claiming bodies that had been strong yesterday. Families huddled together for warmth, yet each breath, each cough, each contact risked transmitting unseen enemies. Agnes knew every visitor, every neighbour, every passing traveller carried the same invisible threat. The world was a careful negotiation, and life required attention to small, meticulous details. Breakfast, when it came, was a quiet affair. Pottage simmered over the fire, the aroma faintly sweet with barley and dried beans, nourishing, enough to fortify bodies against the day ahead. Agnes ladled it carefully into wooden bowls, mindful of portion sizes, enough to give energy, not so much as to waste the scarce food. She watched her children eat, noting every slow chew, every slight hesitation, every tug at warmth against their thin layers of clothing. Illness often started unnoticed, a shiver here, a pallor there, and she had learned to detect it with the attentiveness of someone whose survival depended on vigilance. Her mother stirred beside her, extracting a crust of ice from the water bucket, pouring it into the pot with steady hands. Even these small chores carried risk, the cold water, the frozen floors, the damp air, yet neglecting them could be worse. Clean water and hot food were shields against disease, however small. In the rhythm of preparation, Agnes found a fragile reassurance. The simple acts of tending, feeding, observing and measuring life were themselves weapons against the lingering presence of illness. As the morning unfolded, Agnes noticed her husband's hand tremble slightly when lifting the fire poker. The cough returned, deeper and wetter, and her heart constricted with worry. She offered the ladle of hot pottage to him, guiding his hand with gentle patience. Strength and energy were the currency of survival, and even small sips counted. She reminded herself that the body, though weakened, had endured previous winters, and that resilience was often measured in persistence more than vigour. Her children played quietly near the fire, their movements soft, careful, conserving warmth and energy. The animals in their corner stirred minimally, their breath steady, their warmth radiating through the room, a living buffer against the freezing air. Even Edmund the pig seemed to sense the fragility of health, snuffling and shifting gently rather than moving about too abruptly. In these moments, the family understood the delicate balance that winter imposed, how illness could tip that balance, how every breath, every step, every movement carried weight. Throughout the day, Agnes monitored her husband, her children, and even herself. Fatigue could invite sickness, dehydration could deepen vulnerability, exposure could turn minor chills into dangerous fevers. Each layer of clothing was adjusted, blankets were wrapped tighter, and she ensured that warm fluids were taken steadily. Observation was constant, but done with calm and rhythm, a practiced attention that prevented panic and preserved energy. Winter demanded diligence, but not hysteria. The family's survival relied on measured responses, steady hands, and quiet determination. By mid-afternoon, she could see faint improvement. The cough eased slightly, the colour returned to cheeks previously pale, and the children's eyes brightened with the smallest hints of playfulness. Still, the threat lingered, a quiet murmur at the edges of awareness. Illness was patient. It could return. It could linger. It could strike anew. The day became a careful choreography of nurturing, feeding, warming, and observing, each action both ordinary and profound in its consequence. As twilight approached, Agnes prepared the evening meal, the fire glowing steadily, smoke curling lazily into the thatch above. The day's work was done not in triumph, but in the quiet satisfaction of vigilance maintained. Each body warmed, each breath steady, each heart still beating. Winter's cold had not been defeated, and illness had not been eradicated, but the household persisted. The routine, the care, the deliberate attentiveness had preserved life against a world that would have stolen it without notice. Night fell, bringing with it the familiar darkness that pressed softly against the walls. The children were tucked close, their warmth shared and reinforced, their small bodies safe against the night. Agnes sat briefly by the dying embers, listening to the subtle rhythms of life within the room, the cough of her husband, the gentle snorts of Edmund, the quiet breathing of the children, the shifting of straw and wool. Illness lingered, yes, but it had not overcome them, and the weight of that knowledge was comforting. The day concluded without spectacle or fanfare, only the quiet rhythms of survival, the careful tending to life against the constant presence of winter's cold and illness. As sleep approached, the family huddled together, sharing warmth, sharing presence, sharing vigilance. The night was not without threat, yet it was a space of gentle care, of quiet attention, and of tentative relief. Each body rested, each breath slowed, each heart continued its patient beating. In these quiet moments, Agnes reflected on the persistence required to endure. Winter brought illness as surely as frost, Yet careful attention, gentle action, and unwavering patience allowed life to continue. Strength was measured not in grandeur, but in small, deliberate acts performed repeatedly, without complaint, without pause. And so, as the family settled into sleep, their bodies huddled close against the cold, a sense of quiet accomplishment lingered, a reassurance that even in the face of relentless illness, life could endure, warmth could be maintained, and hope could survive. The night stretches long and quiet, the kind of darkness that settles over the cottage like a thick, heavy blanket. Outside, the world is still, hushed beneath a frozen layer of white. Snow glitters faintly, though there is no light yet to illuminate it, only the soft reflection of the moon hiding behind clouds that drift lazily across the sky. Inside, the cottage is warm but shadowed, the fire reduced to a low glow, embers pulsing softly with heat. Agnes lies awake on the straw mattress, her daughter curled beside her, breathing slow and even. The cold has not yet penetrated fully, but the edge of it is sharp enough to make her small feet curl against her mother's legs. The silence is profound, broken only by the occasional snuffle from Edmund, the pig, huddled with the chickens and sheep in the corner, sharing their warmth with the family. She listens first to her own breath, slow and measured, reminding herself of the warmth she carries within. Then her husband shifts behind her, stirring slightly, a low murmur escaping him as if in a half-dream. His chest rises and falls unevenly, a reminder that winter has been unkind. A cough comes, faint and wet, quickly swallowed by the darkness. She slides her hand beneath the blanket to rest on his arm, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It is reassuring, a small certainty in a world that offers so few. Every pulse, every breath, is a victory against the cold and the sickness that always waits patiently, hidden from view. The room smells of smoke, hay, and the faint tang of livestock. The combination is jarring at first, yet familiar, comforting in its constancy. Agnes inhales deeply, letting the aroma anchor her, letting it remind her of the small routines that have preserved life for generations. The children stir slightly, shifting against the blankets, seeking warmth instinctively. Her daughter's tiny fingers curl into her side, her face nuzzled close, still half asleep. The son, near the foot of the mattress, murmurs in a dream, his body heating the space around him like a small furnace. Agnes traces the curve of his shoulder with her finger, marveling quietly at the fragile persistence of life in this frozen season. Outside, the wind whispers through gaps in the walls, nudging against the thin, oiled linen that serves as window. The sound is a soft reminder that the world is waiting, indifferent to the lives huddled within the cottage. Winter rules with silence and frost, yet there is a quiet beauty to it, a rhythm that has existed long before the first humans learned to build shelters and long after they are gone. Agnes has come to know that rhythm intimately, reading the cold, feeling the weight of night, anticipating its dangers while recognizing its strange, delicate grace. The fire, low and patient, flickers softly. Agnes rises carefully, moving with the practiced quiet of someone who has navigated countless winters. Each step is deliberate, feet brushing against the frozen straw scattered across the floor. She reaches the fire pit, cupping her hands over the embers to draw the faint warmth. A few sticks are added, the dry crackle signalling life returning to the hearth. Smoke rises in thin trails, curling lazily toward the thatched roof. carrying the scent of heat into every corner. She breathes slowly, letting the warmth seep into her bones, aware that this simple act, coaxing fire from embers, is one of the few defenses against the unyielding cold outside. Water is next. The bucket at the corner of the room is coated with a thin layer of ice, a testament to the night's cruelty. Agnes taps the surface gently with her knuckle, cracking it with careful precision. The liquid beneath hisses faintly as she pours it into the iron pot, preparing the first pottage of the day. She measures it precisely, adding the dried beans, peas, and barley saved from last autumn. Each addition is deliberate, an exercise in survival. Small miscalculations could have consequences in this season of scarcity, and she moves with a calm concentration born of necessity. Her husband stirs behind her, stretching slowly, the cough that has haunted him through winter faint but persistent. She hands him the iron ladle, guiding it into his hands with a silent understanding. His eyes meet hers briefly, a conversation unspoken but deeply understood. They have survived this long through quiet coordination, through small gestures, through patience and care. There is no grand heroism here, only the measured rhythm of life, fire, warmth, nourishment, and vigilance. The children shift in their sleep, murmuring, stretching, occasionally opening their eyes to the low glow of the fire. They have learned in their small, unspoken ways the cadence of winter mornings, the patience to stay close, the awareness of cold, the subtle communication of warmth and movement within the crowded space. They trust, instinctively, in their mother and father to navigate the danger that surrounds them, and in this trust a fragile sense of security blooms. Agnes traces the outline of her daughter's hair, feeling the softness against her hand, marvelling that even in the midst of hardship, tenderness persists. Beyond the walls of the cottage, the village sleeps, the snow muffling sound and slowing movement. Roosters wait in the shadows, aware of the approaching day, yet even they hold their calls until the warmth of the sun nudges them to life. The moon slips behind clouds, and the first faint hints of grey begin to filter through the oiled linen window. The light is subtle, almost imperceptible, but Agnes notices it nonetheless. The day is coming, slow and cautious, and with it the tasks that will demand her attention, tending the animals, preparing food, ensuring warmth, observing each family member for signs of weakness or fever. Illness lingers as always, hovering at the edges of consciousness. She watches her husband's chest rise and fall, notes the slight paleness of his skin, the tension in his hands. Her mother coughs softly, the sound muffled by the blankets, yet audible to her attentive ear. Even the children carry minor aches or chills, and she monitors them with careful, loving observation. Each breath, each subtle motion, is a thread in the tapestry of survival she weaves day by day. Breakfast is prepared quietly, pottage simmering and filling the room with the faint aroma of warmth and sustenance. Agnes ladles it into bowls, careful to avoid spills, careful to ensure every portion is enough to sustain without wasting. She observes each mouthful, noting the small changes in colour, energy, and appetite. These are the subtle markers of health, the first indicators that winter has not yet claimed its victims. Each successful morning, each simple act of nourishment, is a small victory against the season's quiet cruelty. By the time the fire burns steadily, casting soft, dancing shadows on the walls, The children are fully awake, moving with the tentative energy of youth. Agnes watches them, noting their strength, their laughter, their cautious exploration of warmth. The animals stir as well, a chorus of soft noises that fill the room with life. Edmund snorts, the sheep shift, the chickens cluck lightly. And in this small orchestra, Agnes finds a sense of equilibrium. Life continues, fragile yet persistent, a testament to attention, care, and endurance. The morning deepens slowly. Outside, the sun is not yet visible, but the sky lightens imperceptibly. Winter is patient, but it is not invincible. Each breath of warmth within the cottage is a quiet defiance, each meal a shield, each act of care a victory. Agnes moves among her family, tending to small needs, offering gentle guidance, monitoring health, and sustaining the fragile network of life she has built against the season's cold. Tea. A rhythm of preparation, vigilance, and quiet observation is ongoing, and she embraces it fully, finding in the repetition a strange comfort. As the first real light begins to filter through distant clouds, the family sits together, warm and nourished, their bodies alive with the gentle, steady pulse of morning. Tasks await, but for a brief, unspoken moment, the day is held in a balance of quiet patience. Agnes feels the weight of survival and the comfort of presence intertwining, the knowledge that even in the bleakest of winters, there is life, there is warmth, and there is care enough to meet the day. In these moments before the sun fully rises, there is a gentle acknowledgement of endurance. The children laugh softly, the animals stir, and the fire hums in steady rhythm. Agnes observes, listens, and breathes, attuned to the fragile equilibrium of life in the deep heart of winter. Each second carries both threat and promise, and she moves within it with calm, attentive hands, preserving warmth, sustaining health, and nurturing the small, enduring miracle of life that continues to persist in the frost-bound world outside. The morning air remains merciless, sharp against the skin even as the weak sun tries to pierce the lingering clouds. Agnes rises carefully from the straw mattress, feeling the cold press against her body like a weight she cannot shake. Her daughter shifts beside her, still half asleep, seeking warmth instinctively, curling her small frame closer. Agnes pushes back the tousled strands of hair, feeling the familiar chill across her shoulders, and slowly she begins the ritual she has performed countless winters before, dressing for survival. Clothing in winter is not a luxury, it is armor. Each layer is chosen for its warmth, its durability, and its ability to retain life in a season that otherwise seems intent on taking it. Agnes slips first into her linen shift, rough against her skin, woven from fibres that have known the wear of generations. The linen is stiff, cold at first, but it has properties that matter. It breathes, dries quickly, and forms a barrier against the next layer, the wool. She pulls the thick woolen gown over the linen, the fabric coarse but pliant, its weight a small comfort. Wool is precious, and each thread carries the labour of hands that prepared it months before, long before winter laid its claim. Her husband stirs behind her, groaning softly as he draws himself upright. The cough that has haunted him through nights of frost rises again briefly, and she offers a small, attentive hand, adjusting the folds of his garments to shield him from the cold that still presses against the walls. Their children begin to move too, dragging themselves into the layers that will protect them for the day ahead. Every sock pulled onto small feet, every cap adjusted over ears, is a tiny victory over the relentless season. It is quiet work, repetitive yet essential, performed with care and patience, born of necessity. Bow. Ots come next, stiff with cold, their leather contracting overnight until they barely yield to the foot. Agnes pushes her own feet in first, wincing at the sharp press of hardened leather, and then helps her children with theirs. Each child struggles slightly, adjusting, wiggling toes into the tight space, pressing heels down to secure warmth. She sighs softly, feeling the cold seep for a moment through the soles of her feet, reminding her that warmth is never permanent in winter, only carefully preserved and guarded. The layers continue, scarves wrapped around necks, mittens pulled onto small hands, hoods adjusted to shield from drafts that slip beneath the roof. Every piece is practical, every stitch purposeful. Comfort is a secondary concern, survival is primary. Agnes works quickly but deliberately, knowing that haste can bring mistakes, buttons undone, gaps in coverage, folds that allow frost to reach skin. The cold is patient, waiting for such mistakes, and she cannot afford them. Her eyes flick to the window, at the pale grey light filtering through the oiled linen, and she notes how much the day has begun even without the sun's full presence. Outside, the wind moves with quiet persistence, whispering through cracks in the walls and pressing against the door. Agnes imagines its journey across fields and frozen streams, how it will sweep over hills and into villages, biting at exposed flesh, seeking warmth to steal. She is grateful for the thickness of the walls, the low ceiling that traps heat, and for the animals clustered in the corner, sharing their warmth. Every layer she puts on, every stitch she adjusts, is a response to that invisible force, a small measure of control in a season that offers very little. The children are now fully dressed, their small bodies wrapped in layers that add weight, but preserve warmth. Agnes watches them carefully, noting how their movements are still cautious, how each stretch or yawn is tempered by the awareness of the cold. Her son rubs his hands together, feeling the wool against wool, a simple act that produces both heat and comfort. Her daughter tugs at the hem of her gown, tugging it down to cover her knees more securely. A gesture of instinctive awareness of danger and protection. Agnes smiles softly, inwardly acknowledging the lessons that winter teaches without words. Edmund, the pig, shifts in his corner, snorting softly, while the sheep and chickens begin their morning murmurs. The animals, like humans, rely on layers and shelter, warmth and proximity to endure. Agnes observes them, noting the subtle movements, the shared heat and the quiet rhythm of life that persists despite the cold pressing against every surface. In this cottage, warmth is a shared resource, circulating between humans and animals alike, a delicate balance maintained through care, attention and instinct. Her husband, now fully dressed, moves to the fire pit. The embers glow faintly, and he begins the ritual of coaxing them in. To flame again. The sound is soft, the crackle of kindling, the hiss of water hitting hot iron, the gentle swish of his hands stirring the embers. Agnes joins him, hands cupped over the growing heat, drawing warmth into her fingers, her palms, her chest. The fire spreads slowly, a small wave of protection against the chill that never fully retreats. Each layer of clothing and each moment by the hearth are part of the same act, maintaining life against the season's quiet but persistent assault. Breakfast waits, simmering gently in the iron pot. Pottage, simple and sustaining, releases steam that mingles with the smoke from the fire. Agnes stirs it, watching the grains and beans soften, transforming into sustenance through heat and patience. Her children press near, drawn to the warmth and the aroma, their eyes bright despite the cold that seeps in from the edges of the room. She ladles portions carefully, mindful that each mouthful carries nourishment, energy, and a small measure of comfort. It is a quiet miracle, the transformation of simple ingredients into life-sustaining food, repeated countless times over the course of long, harsh winters. Outside, the grey sky begins to hint at the coming day. Though the sun is not yet visible, the subtle light filters through the clouds, touching the snow-covered ground with a faint promise of clarity. Agnes moves among her family, checking layers, adjusting garments, ensuring that warmth is not lost in the small gaps that cold seeks. She feels the pressure of responsibility in every stitch, every fold, every adjustment. Survival is not grand. It is measured in careful attention, in persistent care, and in the quiet observation of small needs met consistently. The animals begin to stir more fully, sensing the rhythms of human movement. Edmund snorts, stretching against the warmth of his companions. Chickens flap gently, settling back into their roosts, and the sheep shift closer together, forming a living shield of heat. Agnes watches, appreciating the intricate balance of life in the cottage. Each creature contributes to warmth, to stability, to the preservation of existence during this relentless season. The clothing, the layers, the fire, and the careful tending of bodies, all human and animal, intertwine to form a delicate defense against a world without mercy. By the time the pale light strengthens just enough to reveal shapes through the oiled linen, the family is fully prepared to face the day. Every layer, every garment, every carefully adjusted piece of fabric is part of a larger strategy, to hold life together, to maintain warmth and to endure. Agnes observes her children, noting the small smiles, the cautious movements, and the subtle expressions of resilience. Her husband moves deliberately, tending both fire and hearth, and she feels the weight of gratitude for his presence, for the quiet partnership that ensures survival. In these moments, before the sun fully rises, clothing is more than fabric. It is armor, it is shield, it is protection against forces beyond control. Each layer carries care, history, and purpose. Each stitch and fold is a quiet testament to endurance, a small ritual repeated over generations to preserve life through the bitterest months. Agnes moves among the layers, adjusting, monitoring, and observing with calm diligence. The day awaits, tasks to be performed, work to be done, but for now, the family is held together, warm and clothed against the season's relentless assault. The morning deepens, subtle and slow, yet life continues in careful rhythm. Clothing has done its work, shielding bodies, preserving warmth, enabling movement, and sustaining survival. Agnes moves among her family, animals, and fire, watching the quiet harmony of protection and persistence. Every layer is a small victory, every adjustment a reassurance that even in the coldest, harshest days, life persists, warmth endures, and survival remains possible. The morning settles over the village in quiet grey, soft and steady, yet relentless in its chill. Even as the fire warms the cottage and the thick layers of clothing shield bodies, the world beyond the walls remains unyielding. The snow outside lies heavy and unbroken, pressing against the doors and window frames, bending the low branches of winter-bare trees. Each flake is silent, but together they create a blanket that demands attention. The day, as always, requires labour, and in winter, work never pauses. It has no mercy and no sense of ease, stretching from the first moments after dawn to the dimmest light before dusk. Agnes watches her children begin to stir more fully, their small bodies animated with the simple movements of stretching, yawning, and preparing for the day. Their morning tasks are minor in comparison to those of their parents, yet each is a lesson in endurance. The 7-year-old drags his woolen boots over frozen feet, adjusts the scarf around his neck, and stumbles slightly on the packed earth floor. His sister, 4 years old, follows his movements cautiously, lifting a small blanket to tuck it around her shoulders, instinctively understanding the need for warmth even before her full mind has grasped the logic of it. Agnes smiles softly, appreciating the quiet rhythm of preparation, the unspoken choreography of survival practiced daily through countless winters. Outside the cottage, frost glitters across the village in delicate, crystalline patterns, but the beauty is tempered by practicality. Buckets must be lowered into wells to fetch water, each rope icy and unyielding, cutting into hands that have grown accustomed to cold but still ache when the season presses too hard. Agnes watches her father move deliberately toward the well, steady and careful, as though his long experience has allowed him to anticipate every obstacle. The water waits for no one. It will freeze solid if neglected, and the simple act of hydration becomes a constant negotiation with the season's icy G. Rasp. Inside the cottage, the iron pot simmers gently over the fire, releasing steam that mingles with the smoke rising from the embers. Breakfast must be prepared, the pottage stirred and portions carefully distributed. Every motion is deliberate, conserving energy, preserving warmth, and avoiding unnecessary exertion in the biting cold. Agnes takes the ladle in her hands and begins to stir, moving slowly but purposefully, ensuring nothing sticks to the bottom while drawing warmth from the heat radiating beneath her palms. Her mother works beside her, arranging dried vegetables and grains into the pot, the movements fluid and practiced, a dance repeated countless mornings over decades. Her husband moves toward the animals, checking each in turn, ensuring they are secure and comfortable for the day ahead. The sheep huddle together, forming a living wall of warmth, while the chickens adjust their positions on the crude roost, shifting weight from claw to claw. And Edmund, the pig, grunts softly, stretching and repositioning himself in a corner that has become a pocket of shared heat. Every animal contributes to the household's ability to endure, and every moment spent tending them is a negotiation with life itself. In winter, no creature can afford idleness. Survival demands constant attention, and there is no pause long enough for comfort or rest. The village beyond the walls is awakening in its own rhythm, the faint sound of doors opening, buckets scraping against stone, and the soft murmur of voices carries across the frozen fields. Each neighbour engages in the same cycle of work, small tasks stacking into the machinery of survival. One child pulls a sled across compacted snow to bring firewood closer to a hearth, while another checks the animals in a shed, counting heads, ensuring that nothing has escaped or fallen prey to predators during the night. The wind whispers through gaps in the thatched roofs and around timbered walls, a constant reminder of the world beyond and the labour necessary to live within it. Agnes moves to the corner where the stored firewood waits, carefully selecting pieces for the day's fire. She senses the cold pressing against the doorframe, seeping through cracks, and adjusts her grip on the wood, feeling the chill transfer to her fingers. The weight is familiar and comforting in its own way. It is a tangible connection to survival. Each log placed upon the fire represents hours of effort, a small investment of energy for warmth, light, and the ability to cook. Without such care, the cold would claim its due quickly, unrelenting and unfeeling. Even mundane tasks are infused with urgency in this season. A cracked bucket must be patched, ropes checked for fraying, and clothing mended to ensure no heat is lost. Every stitch counts, every careful knot preserves life. Agnes sits for a moment with needle and thread, repairing the woolen cloak that shields her daughter, and notices the tiny imperfections that winter has created. Holes formed where fabric has rubbed against frozen wood, loose fibres that threaten to unravel. With calm persistence, she restores each item to functionality, understanding that these small labours are as vital as any hunt or harvest. By mid-morning, the cottage is alive with activity, the quiet hum of shared purpose. Agnes's mother tends the pottage, stirring occasionally, while Agnes monitors the fire, adjusting logs and embers to maintain a steady warmth. Her husband moves between animals and supplies, checking each carefully, ensuring that the day's work will proceed smoothly. The children, wrapped in layers, begin to assist in small ways, carrying scraps of food to the animals or fetching water from partially thawed containers. Each contribution, no matter how minor, supports the delicate balance that sustains them through relentless winter days. Outside, the frost glints under pale, shifting light, and the wind presses against doors and walls in steady insistence. The work continues, unbroken, flowing from one task to another without pause. Gathering firewood, preparing meals, mending clothing, tending animals, and monitoring health, all are woven into a single continuous pattern of survival. The season allows no respite, yet there is a rhythm to it, a slow pulse that carries life forward, one careful movement at a time. As the morning stretches onward, Agnes allows herself a quiet breath, standing by the fire for a moment of warmth. The smoke curls around her face, rieing the faint scent of wood and ash, mingling with the aroma of simmering pottage. She watches her family move with the steady diligence required of the season, noting how each person participates in the shared rhythm of work and care. Even in exhaustion, in the weight of cold and endless labour, there is an unspoken satisfaction in action. Each task completed ensures life continues, even as winter presses its relentless claim. The quiet movement of bodies, the rustle of wool, the soft shuffle of feet across packed earth, and the gentle hiss of fire all converge into a lullaby of endurance. There is no grandeur in the labour, no triumph, no celebration beyond the small acknowledgement of survival itself. Each motion is significant only in its continuation, each effort part of an unbroken chain of persistence that has maintained life through countless generations. Agnes, standing amidst the rhythm of her family, feels the quiet weight of purpose, the knowledge that work, unceasing and deliberate, is the vessel through which life is preserved. By late morning, the cottage is filled with warmth and the quiet order of ongoing tasks. Pottage simmers, firewood burns steadily, and animals move with a calm assurance born of routine. Agnes watches her children, noting their small movements, careful not to lose warmth or energy. Her husband checks the animals again, and she moves among them, ensuring every creature is accounted for. The season is harsh, and yet life continues, maintained by the steady, deliberate motion of hands, bodies, and hearts committed to survival. In this world, work never pauses. It is the rhythm of life, the quiet force that sustains existence, and the only defense against the cold that surrounds every home, every field, and every heart. Agnes moves through the day, each action purposeful, each effort small but vital, understanding that survival is built not from grand gestures, but from quiet, unending labour, performed with patience, care, and unwavering determination. The wind outside whistles through the narrow gaps in the wooden walls, rattling shutters and sending tiny tremors through the thatched roof. It carries with it the weight of winter, a reminder that the world beyond the door is unforgiving. Inside the cottage, warmth clings stubbornly to the bodies pressed together. But beyond that fragile boundary, the cold does not rest, and neither does the fear that accompanies it. It is a quiet, persistent presence, a whisper along the edges of consciousness that reminds every person who survives these months that danger lurks beyond the thin walls of home. Agnes rises slowly from her pallet, the straw beneath her creaking in protest as she shifts her weight. Her daughter stirs beside her, murmuring softly in sleep, unaware yet of the hidden threats that stalk the winter days. The 4-year-old's small hands reach instinctively for warmth, curling against her mother's side, and Agnes adjusts the blanket to hold her closer. Even as the fire crackles, sending gentle sparks into the smoke-filled air, the reality of the world outside cannot be ignored. Every door and window in the village is a fragile barrier, a thin shield against cold, hunger, and the creatures that roam beyond human sight. The day has begun, but the air remains thick with unease. Winter has sharpened the senses, teaching everyone in the village to recognize danger in subtle signs, the shifting shadows of a tree line, the muffled crunch of snow that signals movement in the distance, the faint, icy draft that slips through the poorly fitted door. These signals are not imagined. They are the constant reminders that life is a negotiation with forces far larger than any single family. The cold is the first threat, relentless and consuming, but it is not the only one. Wolves move through the forests, searching for food, their keen senses drawing them toward the scent of livestock, the warm bodies huddled in barns and cottages. Agnes's husband checks the animals first, moving quietly to avoid startling them. The sheep shift uneasily, their hooves clicking against the floor as he approaches, while the chickens ruffle and mutter softly from their perch. Edmund, the pig, snorts and shifts in his corner, his bulk providing a comforting presence but no real defense against the dangers outside. Each animal is a living source of sustenance, yet also a potential lure for the creatures of the wild. Every day is a careful balance between tending to ESE sources of warmth and nourishment, and protecting them from threats that the family cannot fully control. The villagers have their routines, honed over countless winters, each step a quiet ritual meant to keep fear at bay. Women gather near the fire to prepare food. Men check fences and reinforce the fragile barriers that separate them from the forest. Children are guided in small tasks that teach them the rhythm of caution. Yet even the most meticulous preparation cannot entirely erase the sense of dread that settles like frost over the mind. The unknown waits in every shadow, in every darkened corner, in every snowdrift where movement may conceal predator or peril. It is a fear learned over lifetimes, passed down from parent to child, embedded in the very muscles that rise to meet the demands of survival. Agnes moves toward the door to fetch a bundle of firewood, her hands wrapped tightly in worn gloves, her breath forming clouds that drift into the cold, dim morning. She pauses, listening, straining to detect any movement beyond the familiar sounds of the household. The wind masks many things, but even in its howl, there is a rhythm that can betray the presence of a stranger, a predator, or a sudden hazard. She steps carefully, feet crunching against the icy ground just enough to remind her of her own vulnerability. Every movement beyond the walls is a negotiation with fear, a quiet acknowledgement that life depends on vigilance as much as warmth. Beyond the cottage, the forest seems both alive and patient. The bare branches of trees creak under the weight of frost, their silhouettes shifting in the grey light of winter morning. Wolves, driven by hunger, glide silently between trunks and over snowdrifts, their golden eyes catching the faint light that manages to pierce the canopy. The village's animals are safer within the walls, but not entirely immune. Even the faintest gap, a broken latch, or a moment of inattention could have devastating consequences. Each day brings a reminder that survival is never guaranteed, that the world outside is as relentless as the cold and as blind to mercy as the winter wind. Inside, Agnes continues her morning tasks, yet her mind cannot escape the constant hum of unease. She checks on her children, ensuring they are dressed warmly, their small fingers and toes protected from frostbite, their movements measured and careful. Her mother stirs in the corner, attending to chores that cannot be delayed, while her father tends the fire, coaxing life back into the embers, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. Every sound within the cottage is a reassurance, a small barrier against the encroaching cold and the invisible threats lurking beyond the door. The wind's howl grows sharper, as though testing the walls, pressing against them with insistent force. It rattles the shutters, slips through gaps and brushes against the frozen ground outside. Agnes pauses for a moment, feeling the pulse of winter in her chest. She listens to the distant cries of animals, both wild and domestic, and senses the fragile balance maintained within the small home. Life here is a series of quiet victories, each meal prepared, each fire fed, each animal checked, each child kept warm and safe. It is an ongoing dance with the unseen, a conversation with forces that cannot be controlled, only respected. Fear is not the absence of warmth, it is the awareness of fragility. Agnes carries it quietly, wrapped around her like a second layer of clothing, pressing her to act, to be diligent, to protect those within her care. The day proceeds with methodical care, stoking the fire, cooking the pottage, checking water buckets, reinforcing barriers, tending the animals, all performed with hands that are steady despite the ever-present tension of potential danger. Each action is imbued with knowledge of the unknown, the unseen, the threats that winter places beyond doors and fences. Hours pass in a steady rhythm, the cottage alive with quiet, deliberate motion. Children learn through observation, mimicking the careful steps of their parents, internalizing lessons of vigilance and patience. Adults, seasoned by countless winters, maintain their routines with practiced efficiency, understanding that fear is an inseparable companion and that respect for its presence is necessary for survival. Every glance at the window, every movement toward the door, every check of the fire or the animals is a dialogue with the unseen, a negotiation that balances life against the relentless demands of the season. By afternoon, the pale light outside begins to soften, though the cold never truly relinquishes its grip. The wind slows in gusts but remains present, pressing its message of caution against every wall. Agnes and her family continue, undeterred, each task a statement of quiet resilience. The fear beyond the door is never dismissed, never ignored. It is acknowledged, accounted for, woven into every motion of daily life. And in this acknowledgement, in this constant negotiation, the family discovers a profound sense of control, not over the world outside, but over the rhythms, the routines, and the small victories that ensure survival in an unyielding season. The cottage remains a haven, a fragile sanctuary, yet it is understood that this safety is provisional, maintained only through vigilance, care, and constant attention. The cold and the unknown press insistently from the outside, a reminder that the winter world is vast, indifferent, and unceasing. Within these walls, life continues, but it is informed by the quiet lessons of awareness, prudence, and the steady persistence that defines survival in a time when fear waits beyond every door. The morning begins quietly, though not gently. Frost clings to the edges of the window, filigree patterns of ice etched by the night, and the air carries that sharp, stinging chill that forces every breath to rise like a ghost from the chest. Agnes stirs beneath her. Thin blanket, feeling the cold press against her skin despite the warmth of her family huddled close. Her daughter's small body curls against her side, a fragile barrier against the relentless winter. The faint rustle of straw beneath her father's feet tells her that he is already awake, tending to the embers that must never die. The fire sputters softly, breathing warmth into the room like the quiet exhale of a living thing. Each log is precious, each spark a small victory in the ongoing struggle to hold the cold at bay. Agnes rises carefully, careful not to disturb the fragile rhythm of the household. Her mother has already begun preparing the morning pottage, scraping frozen water into the iron pot, adding grains and roots that will swell and soften with heat. It is simple food, monotonous, often barely enough, but in this season it is a symbol of life, a tangible expression of survival, of persistence, of hope. In the heart of winter, faith becomes more than prayer. It is a quiet certainty that the next breath, the next day, may be possible. Agnes moves to the small shrine in the corner of the room, a simple shelf where a wooden cross rests, worn smooth by hands that have traced its edges for generations. The incense of burning wood mingles with the smoke of the fire, filling the room with a haze that softens the harsh edges of the cold. She kneels, feeling the weight of the day pressing against her shoulders, and whispers a quiet prayer, not for comfort, but for endurance. Her family watches her with practiced patience. Her husband shifts, coughing softly, a wet sound that carries through the room. His chest rises and falls, a reminder of vulnerability and strength intertwined. Agnes offers no words of reassurance, none are needed. They share a language of gestures and glances built over years, a quiet communion forged by the shared understanding that winter allows no hesitation. Every day is a negotiation with forces beyond their control, and faith is the invisible thread that holds the household together through the long, dark hours. The children, young and innocent, sense the rhythm of the household even before they understand it. Their movements are careful, measured, shaped by the silent lessons of the adults around them. Agnes watches her son roll over, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he stretches, tiny arms reaching for warmth. Her daughter's gaze finds hers, wide and still groggy, as if the act of acknowledgement alone offers some measure of reassurance against the cold that threatens the edges of the room. Even their small bodies, full of resilience and warmth, cannot escape the ever-present chill, yet within the circle of family they find a fragile sanctuary. Faith in this season is a companion as tangible as fire. It is the sense that survival is not merely chance but a pact with unseen forces, a quiet contract renewed with each sunrise. Agnes stirs the pot slowly, wooden spoons scraping the iron bottom in a rhythm that mirrors heartbeat. The grains swell and soften, the water warms, and for a moment the scent of sustenance rises, mingling with smoke and the subtle musk of animals. Edmund the pig snuffles from his corner, a reminder that the household's security extends beyond human warmth. The animals, too, are participants in this quiet ritual. Each heartbeat, each movement, a measure of life preserved against the indifferent season. The wind howls outside, rattling shutters and sending tiny tremors through the walls, but within the room there is a careful order. Agnes's mother hums a soft tune, a lullaby turned work song, as she tends the fire and pours water for the children's wash. Her father moves steadily, checking each corner, feeding embers, coaxing warmth from what seems like almost nothing. The smoke curls lazily, blurring the edges of the room, softening shapes into muted silhouettes. And in this dim haze, fear is less visible, less immediate, though it is never far. Faith fills the gaps left by the shadows, offering a quiet reassurance that the household will endure, that the cold cannot fully claim them. The simple acts of care are themselves a meditation. Each piece of wood placed on the fire, each grain stirred in the pot, each blanket adjusted over a shivering child carries the weight of survival. Agnes moves with the knowledge that every gesture matters, that life in winter is measured not in grand accomplishments but in 1,000 small, deliberate choices. Faith in the cold eye. Not a promise of comfort, but a recognition of limits. That warmth is fleeting, that sustenance is scarce, and that danger is always near. Yet in acknowledging these truths, the household finds its strength. Outside, the village remains quiet, snow muffling the world into soft grey contours. The animals in neighbouring cottages huddle in the shelter of barns and pens, their breath rising in white clouds that drift through the frozen air. Wolves roam the forest edges, their eyes sharp, their movements deliberate, seeking sustenance where the world has become inhospitable. Villagers' preparations are constant, quiet, almost ritualistic. A series of gestures meant to hold the winter at bay. Faith is what allows them to continue these routines without succumbing to despair, what allows hands to move methodically, eyes to remain watchful, hearts to persist in hope despite relentless cold. Agnes gathers her family near the fire for the morning meal. The pottage is simple, barely more than water and grains, but it is life itself. The children eat quietly, their small hands clutching wooden bowls, steam rising in soft wisps that mingle with the smoky haze of the room. Her husband watches, his eyes alert despite exhaustion, and she senses the unspoken gratitude that passes between them. Each day survived is a triumph measured not in celebrations but in the quiet knowledge that all are still breathing, still warm, still together. Even as the day stretches forward, the cold pressing against the walls and slipping beneath doors, faith remains the invisible anchor. It is present in every glance, every gesture, every careful movement. Agnes works beside her mother and children, her hands moving with precision, feeding the fire, stirring the pot, repairing clothing, tending the animals. The wind outside may howl and the snow may fall, but within the walls of this small cottage, life continues, guided by faith in the face of relentless winter. By evening the fire burns low once again, yet the household has endured another day. The children curl against blankets, Edmund snuffles in his corner, and Agnes sits quietly, hand pressed to the worn wood of the table. The smoke lingers, carrying warmth and memory alike. Faith in the cold has carried them through yet another day, a silent, steady force that shapes every action, every breath, every heartbeat. It is not a promise of ease, nor a guarantee against suffering, but it is enough to sustain them, to guide them, to remind them that even in the harshest winter, life persists, and they too persist with it. The room grows quieter as night falls. Shadows lengthen, blending with the smoke and the fading light. Agnes watches her family, each body curled, each breath steady, and allows herself a quiet moment of reflection. The cold outside may be relentless, the dangers beyond the door ever present, but within these walls, faith is a living thing, as tangible as warmth, as necessary as food, as enduring as the heart. Beat that carries each of them through another night, in the long, unforgiving winter. The night arrives slowly, folding the day into a soft grey shadow that swallows the edges of the cottage. The last light of winter slips beneath the horizon, and the wind carries the cold through the gaps in the walls, pressing against doors and windows with an insistent chill. Inside, the fire has been coaxed to a steady glow, embers breathing warmth into the room, painting shapes in orange gold against the smoke-darkened walls. Agnes settles herself on the straw mattress, her children huddled close, their warmth a fragile shield against the pervasive cold. Outside the world is quiet, save for the soft whisper of snow falling, dusting rooftops and the frozen earth in pale white. The village is asleep, the animals tucked into pens, the wind shaping drifts around the cottages. In the darkness, every sound carries weight, the faint creak of wood settling, the soft rustle of straw beneath a shifting body, the snuffle of Edmund the pig as he curls in his corner. They are the markers of life in a world that is otherwise harsh and indifferent. Agnes breathes slowly, inhaling the faint smoke, the warmth of her family, the soft scent of worn wool and earth. In winter, the night is not simply a pause, it is a battlefield, a space where vigilance and rest must coexist. Her first sleep is shallow, fragmented by the instinct to protect and sustain. Every hour carries the potential for danger. The fire a falter, a child may stir, the cold may creep too far beneath the blankets. She closes her eyes, allowing the exhaustion of the day to pull her down, but her senses remain alert, finely tuned to the subtleties of movement and sound around her. The first sleep passes in fragments, a series of shallow dreams and waking moments stitched together by instinct. Agnes dreams not of distant lands or imagined adventures, but of warmth, of fires that hold through the night, of blankets thick enough to hold back the frost, of her children safe and breathing beside her. These dreams are brief, almost tangible, and they rise and fall with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The cold seeps through the layers of straw and wool, but the proximity of her family keeps it at bay, a reminder that survival is collective, that warmth is shared. Hours pass, though the night gives no measure of them, The fire crackles quietly, sending tiny sparks upward into the smoke that curls lazily beneath the thatch. Edmund shifts, the soft grunt of his snuffling blending with the hushed breathing of the children and the low groan of her father's joints as he moves to tend the embers. Agnes feels the familiar weight of responsibility in her chest, to feed, to warm, to ensure that life persists through the relentless hours. Yet even in the vigilance, there is a strange comfort, a rhythm that has become as natural as breathing, as necessary as warmth itself. When the first sleep passes, it is not an awakening so much as a shift. Agnes stirs beneath the blanket, feeling the cold bite at her skin, sharper now after the relative warmth of the first rest. Her daughter murmurs in sleep, pressing closer, and her son stretches, small arms reaching for heat. The room has settled into a quieter rhythm. The fire, tended through the hours, glows steadily, casting shadows that dance softly across the smoke-hazed walls. There is a stillness now, a calm that comes only in the deep hours of winter before dawn. The second sleep is different. It is deeper, richer, the kind that seeps into the bones and muscles, undoing the tension of hours spent awake in vigilance. Agnes allows herself to sink fully into the straw mattress, the edges of her consciousness softening like the edges of snow under the low light of the moon. In this sleep, the body remembers warmth even when the air is cold. Every breath is unburdened, every heartbeat slow and steady, untroubled by the vigilance that marks the first sleep. The children curl tighter against her, their small forms radiating warmth, their breathing even and unhurried. In this deeper sleep, the mind travels gently. Agnes dreams not of fear, but of small beauty, the shimmer of sunlight on snow, the delicate frost patterns that trace the edges of leaves, the quiet satisfaction of a fire well tended, the smell of hot pottage rising in the morning. There is no urgency here, no pressing weight of survival, only the soft pulse of life continuing quietly against the back. Drop of relentless winter. Even Edmund snores in his corner, a wet rumbling sound that blends into the gentle cadence of the room. The two sleeps are a rhythm of endurance, a pattern learned over years of winters like this. The first sleep teaches vigilance, the necessity of attention and care. The second sleep restores, replenishes, allows the body and mind to gather strength for another day of careful survival. Each is essential, each a complement of the other. Agnes knows this without thought, her body accustomed to the flow, her mind attuned to the subtle markers of the night, the warmth of the fire, the rise and fall of breathing, the soft movements of the children, the occasional shifting of her husband as he adjusts in his corner. Time becomes meaningless in these hours. The night stretches and folds upon itself, a continuous grey expanse outside the oiled linen window. Agnes does not count the hours. She does not measure the night in minutes. Instead, she measures it in breaths, in warmth preserved, in quiet victories, a spark coaxed from embers, a child stirred gently without waking, a blanket adjusted just enough to keep the frost from stealing its claim. Faith in the rhythm of these sleeps becomes part of survival. It is not a promise that danger will not come, but a recognition that endurance is possible, that warmth can be maintained, that life continues. The second sleep carries the reassurance of continuity. Agnes dreams of the simple things that mark the pass. Age of seasons, green shoots pushing through thawing soil, the laughter of children chasing through fields, the low murmur of animals in pens and barns, the satisfaction of a fire burning steadily in a hearth. These dreams, gentle and unobtrusive, form a quiet tapestry of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest winter, renewal follows endurance. When she wakes, it will be into the grey light of morning, the work of tending and feeding and sustaining awaiting, yet she will rise with a deeper strength because the second sleep has carried her through the worst of the night. In the quiet of the room, Agnes allows herself to linger in this restorative stillness. She listens to the low breathing of the children, the occasional grunt from Edmund, the faint crackle of the fire. The night outside presses in with cold and shadow, but inside, the rhythm of the two sleeps holds. It is a rhythm older than memory, older than written history, a cadence of life preserved through instinct, experience, and quiet perseverance. Each cycle of wakefulness and rest, vigilance and release, shapes the household's endurance, teaching patience, careful observation and gratitude for the smallest comforts, a spark, a breath, a warm body pressed against hers. Through the night, through the two sleeps of winter, Agnes is reminded that survival is not measured in grand feats or heroic gestures, but in persistence, in the delicate interplay of caution and rest, in the careful balance between attending and de-surrendering, between vigilance and restoration. The body, the family, the fire, the animals, they all participate in this quiet symphony, and when the first hint of dawn begins to touch the sky, soft and grey, she knows that she has passed through the night once more, carrying herself and her family with grace through the long, relentless hours of winter. The night outside stretches wide, a quiet expanse of muted grey, the snow settling softly over the frozen fields and cottages. Inside the cottage the fire burns low but steady, its warmth a gentle hum against the persistent chill of winter. Agnes lies on the straw mattress, her children nestled close, their soft breathing a rhythm she knows without thought. The world beyond the walls is cruel and indifferent, yet here, in this small space, life continues with quiet determination. The cold presses against every corner, against every joint and finger, but it cannot penetrate the bonds of family, of warmth shared and carefully tended. In this long winter, dreams have become a kind of sanctuary. They are not the fanciful tales one might tell by the hearth in summer, nor the wild imaginings that children invent in light-filled rooms. These dreams are simpler, elemental, warmth, safety, and continuity. Agnes drifts between the two sleeps of the night, floating in a liminal space where vigilance softens and the body remembers what it feels like to be protected from the cold. She dreams of sunlight, not the harsh glare of midwinter, but the gentle, forgiving rays that make frost sparkle like tiny jewels. She dreams of fields that breathe beneath the sky, their snow melting into soft, moist earth that promises life yet to come. Her mind carries her to distant memories, warm days from seasons past, children running barefoot through meadows, the low hum of bees, the gentle sway of wheat under a summer breeze. Even in dreams these recollections are tinged with winter's chill, a reminder that the warmth she remembers is not yet here, that the present remains a frozen world. Still, the act of remembering, of wrapping herself in the comfort of past summers, brings a quiet strength, a soft hope that persists even when the body shivers beneath layers of wool and linen. Outside the wind sighs against the thatch roof, slipping through the cracks in the woven walls. Each gust carries a sharpness that bites at the skin, yet inside the cottage resists. The fire, carefully nurtured, sends gentle waves of heat across the room. Agnes can feel it in her toes, the small warmth seeping slowly upward, battling the chill that rises from the packed earth floor. Edmund shifts in his corner, snuffling and huffing, his presence a small furnace that spreads across the space like a living ember. The children adjust instinctively, pressing against her and each other, pooling their warmth in soft, living clusters that the cold can only touch at the edges. In her dreams, Agnes imagines the cold not as an enemy, but as a distant companion, a contrast that highlights the warmth and life within these walls. She pictures the frost outside as silver lace along the edges of windows, each delicate pattern a work of art carved by winter itself. She imagines the fire's glow reaching out to touch the snow, creating tiny halos of orange light against white drifts. The dreams carry her into this subtle beauty, allowing her mind to rest while the body remains alert enough to respond to any shift, any danger, however faint, that might disturb the fragile comfort of her family. The night deepens, and with it, the rhythm of breath and warmth continues. Agnes can sense the subtle adjustments her husband makes as he shifts to tend his own comfort, the small deliberate movements her father performs as he ensures the embers are fed just enough to sustain a gentle heat, and her mother's quiet stirring as she tends to the cooking pot, even in the depth of night. Each action, though half asleep, is a thread in the delicate tapestry of survival, weaving warmth into every corner of the room. The children, oblivious to strategy or effort, simply sleep, radiating the heat that keeps winter at bay. In the sanctuary of sleep, Agnes dreams of simpler labours and gentler rhythms, the rise of sun over the horizon, snow melting under tender rays, the soft hum of water running freely again through streams, and the scent of thawing earth. These visions are tinged with longing but not despair. They are gentle, carrying the quiet reese, assurance that winter, for all its harshness, will eventually release its hold. In dreams, she can imagine herself walking through fields of soft green, hands brushing against growing plants, the promise of renewal tangible against the memory of frost. Yet even in dreams, the cold is present, a constant companion that cannot be fully banished. It threads through the images of warmth, a reminder that life in this time is never unchallenged. Agnes feels it in her skin, senses it pressing at her fingers and toes beneath layers of wool and linen. But within the dream, the cold does not dominate. It frames the warmth, emphasizing it, giving the heat and light their value. Every moment of comfort, every ember, every shared breath becomes more precious when measured against the chill that waits beyond the walls. Her mind drifts further, settling on the small joys that sustain life through winter. The first sip of pottage in the morning, thick and steaming, the quiet satisfaction of a fire carefully built, the soft murmurs of children playing quietly indoors, the small miracles of survival that repeat in gentle, reliable rhythms. These are not grand triumphs, but they carry a deeper significance. Each instance of warmth or sustenance is a victory against the cold, a reaffirmation of life, a quiet insistence that the family endures. Agnes imagines walking outside in the dream, the snow soft beneath her feet, the sky pale but full of light. She breathes deeply, inhaling the crisp air, feeling it fill her lungs even as it stings, imagining her body warmed from within. In this imagined landscape, the cold is softer, gentler, less biting. It is a companion rather than a threat, a presence that reminds her of the value of heat, of the small comforts within reach. The dream carries a meditative calm, a sense of harmony, even as the real winter presses against her in the darkness of the cottage. The two sleeps of the night continue their rhythm, the first vigilance and the second restoration. But within this chapter of dreams, Agnes discovers a deeper layer of endurance, the mind's ability to conjure warmth, the imagination's subtle alchemy, turning memory and hope into a refuge. Even as frost coats the edges of the oiled linen window, even as the fire burns low, the dream carries her forward, wrapping her in gentle light and heat. The rhythm of breath, the soft pressing of children's bodies, the steady warmth of the animals, all harmonize with the dream, a quiet orchestra of life sustained through winter's rigor. Through these hours, Agnes learns that survival is not simply physical, it is mental, emotional, imaginative. Dreams of warmth, even when cold surrounds, are as essential as fire or blankets, as crucial as food or clothing. They allow her to persist, to continue waking, tending, and protecting, even in the deepest winter. She sleeps, she dreams, she rests, and when the second sleep softens into morning, she will rise with the quiet strength nurtured by hours of calm reflection and gentle hope. The early morning air is still sharp, a fine edge pressing against the skin and stealing warmth from even the thickest layers of wool. Inside the cottage, the fire is fed and steady, glowing orange across the uneven walls, offering its fragile sanctuary from winter's relentless grip. Agnes moves carefully, bending over the iron pot to stir the slowly steaming pottage, her breath rising in soft clouds before fading into the smoke-filled air. Each motion is deliberate, measured. Every movement in winter requires thought, care, a consciousness of the cold that waits beyond the circle of warmth. Her husband sits nearby, wrapped in rough wool, his chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm interrupted by occasional coughs. A wet, rattling sound that carries the sharp weight of worry through the quiet room. Agnes watches him with eyes that have learned the subtle signs of fatigue, fever, and resilience, knowing that illness in this time is a silent predator, invisible yet pervasive, able to take a life before it can even be named. She reaches for the clay bottle of medicine, the liquid inside bitter and earthy, meant to coax strength from weakness, to push back against fever and the creeping exhaustion that comes with relentless cold. There is no certainty in administering it. No guarantee that a few drops, carefully measured, will turn the tide. In the winter of the 1340s, in a small village tucked into the folds of England's frosted hills, every remedy is a hope, a prayer, an experiment conducted in the dim light of embers. Agnes pours the medicine into a cup, diluting it with ice-laden water from the bucket. Her hands, raw and chapped from cold, shake slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. Every drop counts, every action could mean survival, or not. The children, still half asleep, shift in their corners, muffled murmurs escaping their lips as they seek warmth, the unconscious awareness of vulnerability guiding their movements. Agnes tucks the blanket tighter around her daughter's shoulders and lifts her son gently, brushing strands of straw from his face, before placing him again against the soft heat of the mattress. In this household, warmth is shared, rationed, and carefully measured, just like food and water and firewood. Each living body becomes a source of survival, a human radiator in a season that would see many stolen away by frost or fever. Agnes lifts the cup, tilts her husband's head slightly, and eases the medicine between his lips. He swallows automatically, eyes half closed, muscles relaxed but tense enough to remind her of the fragility beneath apparent strength. She whispers words of comfort, a cadence learned over years of shared hardships, and steps back, letting his body rest. Outside, the wind rattles against the woven walls, carrying snow in quiet flurries pressing against the small, oiled linen window as if testing the cottage's defences. Agnes feels it in her chest, the subtle tightening of breath, the familiar chill creeping through the floorboards despite the fire's patient glow. In her mind, she drifts to the knowledge that illness is an unpredictable visitor. A cough can linger, a fever can spike and fade only to return with a sharper bite. A simple wound can fester unseen beneath layers of cold-weather clothing. There is no certainty, no way to foresee outcomes, only small, careful actions and vigilant observation. Each moment spent tending the sick is weighted with both hope and caution, every gesture a quiet negotiation with fate. Agnes learns to measure success not in immediate recovery, but in survival from 1 hour to the next, 1 day to the next, holding her breath between tasks and trusting in instinct and experience to guide her. The fire pops softly, sending tiny sparks dancing into the low ceiling, which smells faintly of smoke, damp straw, and the faint sweetness of dried grains. Agnes stirs the pottage again, mindful of the children who begin to stretch and murmur, their small bodies bringing warmth back into the room. Even as she tends to the food, her thoughts return to her husband, the delicate balance of medicine and attention, and the silent prayers that accompany each measured dose. Winter is merciless, but the human body has resilience, a stubborn insistence to cling to life even when the frost presses its heaviest. Outside, the village begins its own slow awakening. Doors creak against icy hinges. The scrape of boots on frozen earth carries faintly to Agnes's ears, the muffled lowing of livestock and distant barking of dogs blending into the quiet rhythm of winter morning life. She senses that every household faces its own quiet battles with illness and cold, that each person must navigate uncertainty with patience, care, and determination. Here, in her cottage, she has the added advantage of proximity, the ability to act, to monitor, to adjust as subtle shifts in breathing or warmth hint at danger. Still, she is never free from doubt. The winter light filters through the oiled linen window, grey and muted, casting soft, diffused illumination over the room. Shadows stretch across the walls, elongated and faint, revealing the contours of objects and bodies alike. Agnes watches them quietly, noting the slight relaxation in her husband's shoulders, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, and allows herself a slow exhale. Small signs, easily overlooked, but to her they speak volumes. Recovery is not guaranteed, but survival is still possible. The medicine has done its part, her care has done its part, and now she waits, vigilant but calm, accepting the unknown as part of life. In this frozen world, her mind wanders, as it does in these quiet hours, to the countless generations before her who faced the same uncertainty. Mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, all living under the same unyielding sky, trusting in intuition, experience, and small remedies to protect their families. She imagines them, hundreds of years before, tending fires, preparing meals, watching over the sick with no more knowledge than she possesses, yet with the same stubborn dedication to life. Winter may have been merciless, but life has always found a way to endure, step by careful step. Even as Agnes tends to the household, the dream of certainty persists, though it is always just beyond reach. She longs for confidence, for the assurance that medicine will heal, that fevers will break, that the frost will recede and warmth will reign. But she knows better than to expect it. Life is measured not in guarantees, but in careful management, in observation, in the small, repeated efforts that together hold death at bay. Each dose of medicine is an act of defiance, each meal prepared a bulwark against despair. Every whispered reassurance to a child a declaration that life continues. The children begin to stir fully now, blinking against the low light, seeking comfort and sustenance. Agnes moves among them with practiced ease, distributing warmth, adjusting blankets, preparing the room for the day ahead. Her husband stirs slightly, eyes opening just enough to acknowledge her presence. A faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. In that moment, the uncertainty loosens its grip, if only a little, as the quiet rhythm of household life asserts itself over the unpredictable nature of illness and winter's cold. Agnes allows herself a moment to breathe, to recognize the strength she has summoned, the care she has provided, the small victories that have accumulated without fanfare. The fire glows steadily, the children breathe deeply. The cold is held at bay for now, and the medicine, though uncertain in its effect, has been administered with intention and care. Winter remains, merciless and unyielding, but life persists, and in that persistence lies a quiet triumph that requires no heralding, no applause, only the calm acceptance of survival in the face of the unknown. The cottage is quiet now, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the muted breathing of those huddled within. Winter still presses against the walls, a relentless weight of cold and shadow that seeps through the smallest cracks and drifts across the packed earth floor. Outside, the wind sighs and whispers across the snow, brushing it lightly against the thatched roofs of neighbouring cottages. It is a sound both harsh and beautiful, a reminder that life persists even when the world seems frozen and still. Inside, however, there is warmth, not just of fire, but of presence, of shared existence, of bodies pressed together against the chill. Agnes sits by the fire, her hands wrapped around a steaming bowl of pottage. The meal is modest, composed of grains, dried vegetables, and the faint remnants of last autumn's harvest. But it is nourishment nonetheless. Her children sit nearby, their small hands clutching at their own bowls, their faces pale from the cold but bright with the quiet energy of youth. Every bite is precious, every swallow an act of quiet defiance against the season's unyielding grasp. To survive in this world is to appreciate the smallest comforts, the simplest blessings, and the most fleeting moments of warmth and light. She watches her husband, who stirs slowly, his body still recovering from the lingering cough that winter had brought upon him. There is a fragility to him now, a visible reminder of the season's toll on human life. Yet he moves with the quiet determination of a man who knows that survival is not a gift but a responsibility. Every step he takes, every task he performs, is an assertion that life continues despite the frost that lingers at the edges of existence. Agnes feels a swelling of gratitude, tempered by the ever-present knowledge that illness and cold can strike again, unannounced at any moment. Outside, the village begins its slow rhythm of work. The soft creak of well buckets, the muted clatter of boots against frozen earth, and the occasional lowing of livestock echo faintly through the walls of the cottage. Each sound is a reminder that survival is communal, that life persists not in isolation but in the careful interplay of shared effort, shared vigilance, and shared hope. Villagers move with purpose, tending animals, breaking ice and feeding fires, each aware that the smallest neglect could tip the fragile balance between life and death. Winter teaches a clarity that only hardship can bring. Every action matters, every decision carries weight, every day is a gift to be earned through care and attention. Agnes looks at her children, noting the resilience etched into their young faces. In a world so determined to take, to test, to punish, she finds small evidence of endurance. Their laughter, fleeting but genuine, peeks through the quiet moments between tasks. Their curiosity about the patterns of frost on the window, the tracks left by animals in the snow, the way smoke curls upward from chimneys, all these small wonders survive alongside the relentless cold. Survival is not merely existing, it is noticing, appreciating, and finding beauty in moments when the world seems determined to strip it away. The fire warms the room, but Agnes knows it is more than flames that keep life moving. It is the rhythm of care, the tending of animals, the stirring of pottage, the gathering of wood, the quiet ministrations to those who are ill, and the delicate balance of bodies pressed together for warmth. She watches her mother adjust a blanket over her father's shoulders, and she senses the years of knowledge and instinct passed down from generation to generation. Each gesture is small, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but it carries the weight of survival. The season may be merciless, but humans have learned to persist, to resist, to act in concert with one another to hold the darkness at bay. Agnes's mind drifts to the countless ancestors whose lives have been claimed by winter. She thinks of the unrecorded deaths, the small graves dug silently in frozen soil, the children lost to fever, the farmers who fell to exhaustion, and the mothers who mourned quietly while tending to those who remained. Survival is not simply living, it is enduring the loss, continuing onward despite grief, and ensuring that the thread of life is passed along. Every meal prepared, every fire stoked, every blanket shared is an act of rebellion against the indifference of the season. Her husband finally rises fully, stretching stiff limbs and moving to gather the remaining embers from the hearth. Each spark he coaxes into flame is a reminder that survival is active, a constant engagement with the world's harsh realities. Agnes joins him, bringing a small bundle of kindling to feed the fire. Together they move in silent coordination, their bodies remembering the motions of countless mornings in winters past. This shared routine, though simple, is sacred, a ritual of persistence, of defiance, of life maintained in the face of adversity. Even the animals participate in this quiet harmony. The children's sheep, their chickens, and Edmund the pig provide warmth and sustenance, their presence a consta. NT, reminder that life is interconnected. Feeding them, checking on them, and ensuring their safety is as vital as tending the fire or preparing the meal. The animals are companions and guardians, silent witnesses to the human struggle against frost and hunger. In their breathing, their shifting, their small movements, Agnes finds both comfort and a reminder of the fragile balance between survival and loss. Outside, snowdrifts continue to accumulate, soft and silent, covering the landscape in a bright, cold blanket. Yet within the cottage, the layers of human care, attention, and love create a microcosm of safety and warmth. Survival is not glamorous, nor is it assured. It is a sequence of small victories, a meal prepared, a fire maintained, a cough soothed, a child warmed, a heart steadied. Each of these victories is ordinary, often unnoticed, yet in the aggregate, they form the foundation of life in the harshest of seasons. Agnes reflects on the nature of survival itself. It is neither heroic nor dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply human. It is measured not in grand triumphs, but in the ability to endure, to adapt, and to continue. Winter strips life to its essentials: heat, food, care, and vigilance. Anything beyond that is a luxury. And yet, within these stark parameters, humanity finds resilience. Love persists, hands reach out, eyes meet with understanding, and hearts beat in shared rhythm. Survival is everything, because it is the prerequisite for all else. Hop, laughter, work, dreams, and the quiet moments of peace that punctuate the day. As the day progresses, Agnes moves among her family, tending, feeding, adjusting, ensuring that warmth and nourishment are maintained. She watches her children play briefly near the hearth, noting their small smiles, the softness in their eyes, the sense of wonder that persists even in the cold. Her husband works alongside her in preparing what little food is available, his cough subdued for now, his body steady in the rhythm of life. The cottage is filled with movement, warmth, and quiet determination. Each breath, each step, each small act of care is a testament to the human instinct to survive, even as the sun struggles to climb above the grey horizon. The family continues their work. Winter may demand everything, yet they hold it at bay through vigilance, love, and careful effort. Survival is a quiet triumph, lived in moments rather than announced in words. Each day endured, each night survived, is a victory without fanfare, a testament to the strength and resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Agnes pauses, leaning against the warm glow of the fire, and feels a deep sense of connection to all who have endured before her and to those who will endure long after. Survival is everything because it is life itself, fragile yet stubborn, ephemeral yet enduring. In the rhythm of tending, feeding, caring, and protecting, she finds meaning. In the warmth she fosters against Winter's relentless cold, she finds purpose. And in the quiet of this snowy morning, surrounded by family, fire, and the breathing of animals, she understands, with a calm certainty, why survival is more than just living. It is the essence of being, the core of human experience, and the quiet triumph that makes everything else possible. The day stretches ahead, long and cold, but within these walls, life continues. The fire burns, the children laugh softly, the animals shift contentedly, and Agnes moves among them with deliberate care. The weight of winter presses, but survival presses back, steady, unyielding, and absolute. Here, in the quiet, calm embrace of warmth, life persists and survival is everything.